Chapter 1068. Feng Ling stood downstairs of Li Nanheng's residence and looked at the window with the light turned off. She stood there for a long time to make sure that the light was not turned on again. After confirming that he was really asleep, she turned around with the documents in her hand. However, she still didn't believe that he could sleep so early. As she walked, she looked back. It was dark in the room. Was it because he didn't sleep well at home because of grandfatherly? Did he want to rest early after returning to the base today? It was so late. It didn't seem necessary for her to knock on his door now. Even if she got the signature now, she couldn't leave the base overnight. She had to wait until tomorrow morning. Besides, it was not easy to knock on his door. Every time she entered his room, she would suffer a lot before she could leave. Feng Ling didn't go, but went back to the guest room upstairs in the base hall. The next morning, she woke up very early and wanted to go to his place to wait for him. However, when she arrived, the two men passing by outside the door saw her and asked excitedly, "Feng Ling, are you here to look for boss?" So now everyone knew that Li Nanheng and she had feelings for each other. Feng Ling answered, "Yes, I have something to talk to him about. Boss woke up early. I saw him go to the base cafeteria half an hour ago. He didn't seem to eat anything last night. He should have gone to eat breakfast early today. There are people from the military coming over in the afternoon. Boss has been busy recently." "I see. Thank you." Feng Ling nodded and turned to walk to the base canteen. It was only 6 o'clock in the morning. He went downstairs half an hour ago. Did he sleep early last night? Feng Ling was confused but didn't think much. She went to the canteen and thought that she could find him, but she looked around the canteen and didn't see Li Nanheng. "Did you see Bosley?" After looking for a long time, Feng Ling stopped a man who had just finished eating and asked, "Bosley, he just had breakfast here and left. Where did he go?" "I don't know. Unlike us, Bosley can only go to the fixed training ground every day. Boss goes to Team 1, the sniper team, and Team 4 to see the newcomers. After a while, he has a meeting with Ah Feng and the others. He also has military affairs. I don't know where he is now." Feng Ling once again held the document in her hand and stood rooted to the ground. A moment later, she picked up her cell phone expressionlessly and called Li Nanheng. The phone was turned off. Very good. Was he really so busy that he couldn't see his tail, or was he deliberately ignoring her and not seeing her? But thinking about it carefully, he hadn't looked for her in the past 9 months. How could he have deliberately left her hanging? 11 base was not small. Not every member could easily meet someone of Li Nanheng's status. She used to see him often, but that was because he wanted her to. It wasn't that Feng Ling didn't know this. But she wasn't looking for him right now. She just wanted his signature. Looking at the people in the cafeteria who were looking at her curiously, Feng Ling turned around and walked out with a dark expression. 11 base was so big. She was likely to go to Team 1, but he was in another team. She went to another team, but he went to another team. She couldn't find him at all. She simply went to a certain road in the base and found a stone puppet to sit on. She swore that as long as Li Nanheng signed the document to let her go to High City, she would immediately leave 11 base and never look for him again. Absolutely yes, no, she would. Then Feng Ling sat on the stone puppet on this road for 2 hours, but Li Nanheng still didn't pass by. She called him again, but his phone was still turned off. Feng Ling sat there, holding the document in her hand. Her patience was almost exhausted, and she thought hopelessly she'd better go to his place. He had something to discuss with the people from the military in the afternoon. The weather was so hot. A person like him who was obsessed with cleanliness should come back to take a shower and change his clothes after finishing his work in the morning. In fact, the news that Feng Ling had returned to the base had long been spread in the base. Even if Li Nanheng was not in the base 2 days ago, his subordinates were all well-informed and observant. How could they not know that someone was waiting for him in the base? Li Nanheng came back from Team 4 and went directly to the base hall. Ah Feng was having a meeting with several other people in the hall. Seeing Boss come, he stood up. "Boss." Xiao Su also came in to submit something at this time. Seeing Li Nanheng come in, he suddenly asked suspiciously, "Feng Ling has been looking for you. Have you seen her?" Li Nanheng picked up the teacup and took a sip, saying lightly, "Looking for me?" Seeing his expression as if he didn't know, Xiao Su coughed. "It seems that she hasn't seen you yet." Li Nanheng didn't answer, nor did he respond to this matter. He went straight to business with Ah Feng, but Xiao Su didn't give up. As soon as they were idle, he interrupted and finally told them that Feng Ling wanted to go to High City to be Mrs. Mo's bodyguard and wanted Boss's signature to let her go. Then he just stood there, waiting to see Boss's expression. "Boss, did Mr. Mo inform you that Feng Ling is going to High City? Have you received the news?" Ah Feng asked. "Boss, did Mr. Mo inform you that Feng Ling is going to High City?" Li Nanheng didn't take this topic seriously and didn't say anything. Since he came back from Boston with serious injuries, Li Nanheng had never mentioned Feng Ling's name or asked anything about her. Now, he also didn't mention anything about her. "If you really don't want to care about Feng Ling anymore, boss, can you give me a temporary privilege? I'll sign for her and let her go wherever she wants," Ah Feng said again. Li Nanheng glanced at him coldly. "Do you have nothing better to do?" "Why do I have nothing better to do? Do you dare to say that you're not giving her the cold shoulder? After all, she was so embarrassed when she left. Now that she can stand in the base again, you still let her wait for you in the base for several days. Tell me, you've been helping her prepare for a rainy day. Now that she has returned to the base, why don't you hurry to let her stay? Why don't you see her or sign for her to let her go? What are you planning?" Ah Feng couldn't hold back anymore. Li Nanheng's face was cold and calm. "It has nothing to do with me whether she returns to the base or not. When did I help her prepare for a rainy day?" Xiao Su couldn't help glancing at him. Then, after she was forcibly taken away from Boston, the Ted couple took her away so smoothly, and now the letter of appointment to the base has been issued so smoothly. She has regained all her face. Does it have nothing to do with you, boss? Please remember the domain name of this book. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1069. That's her own business. Do you think she will be useful just because I asked Mr. Ted to hire her as a bodyguard and let her go to the city hall?" Li Nanheng said coldly. Ah Feng chuckled. "Others might not understand this, but we can. You knew that Mr. Ted's family was grateful to Feng Ling for saving them. So you used this incident as bait and successfully lured Feng Ling back to Los Angeles from Boston. It seemed like nothing happened, but in fact, your plan was very shrewd. You helped her pave the way back to the base with the help of Mr. and Mrs. Ted. When the election time came, you could bring her back to the base. That's right, boss. You're obviously still thinking about her in your heart. Why do you have to be so cold, as if nothing has happened? You think too much." Li Nanheng stood there calmly and glanced at Ah Feng. "Don't mention this name in front of me again. If you talk to me again, I'll tell the Li family that you're neglecting your duty here and kick you back to the Li family." Ah Feng was about to curse, but before he could say anything, he saw Li Nanheng's back. He was clearly the one who had already paved the way for Feng Ling, but now he turned around and refused to admit it. How King annoying. Li Nanheng walked quickly out of the base hall. Under the hot morning sun, his face was as cold as frost. He walked back with only one thought in his mind. When Feng Ling left the base, she had to take back what she had lost by herself. She did it. She had a proud personality and was extremely strong. If someone hurt her once, it would be useless even if that person paid back 1,000 times more. If she wanted to deny something, it would be equivalent to it not existing. She only wanted to rely on herself and didn't want to ask for help from anyone. She didn't even want to come back to 11 base. She could clearly use the road he had paved for her, but until now, she still refused. She was really stubborn and stupid. Li Nanheng sneered, but then he smiled self-deprecatingly. No, in fact, there was someone more stubborn and stupid than her. Otherwise, he wouldn't have fallen head first in her pit and couldn't climb up even after his head was broken and bleeding. Feng Ling waited outside his room for a long time. She didn't know when he would come back. She wanted to go to the room she used to stay in, but found that the door was locked. It seemed like the door was locked when she came that day. Unless she agreed to move in, the door would always be locked and no one else could enter. There was no place to sit in the corridor. She had been standing for a long time. Even if she had enough stamina, it wasn't enough to keep standing. She squatted by the wall for a while until her legs were numb. Just as she was about to stand up, she suddenly heard footsteps coming from the corridor. She turned to look in the direction of the staircase. In the next second, her legs gave way and she almost knelt down. The light in the corridor was a little dim, but it was still spacious. Li Nanheng stood there, looking at her coldly. The moment Feng Ling met his gaze, she raised her hand to support herself against the wall. She secretly cursed herself for squatting earlier. Her legs were numb, and she could not stand steadily for a moment. This posture was somewhat awkward. When she looked at him again, she felt as if she could be frozen into an ice cube under his gaze. The man who had almost died with her in the Boston jungle 9 months ago was standing there, looking at her expressionlessly and indifferently. It was not until the moment they finally met that Feng Ling realized that she and Li Nanheng had brushed past each other in the past 9 months, but basically they had never seen each other before. Even when their eyes met, they were very strange and alienated. In her mind, when Li Nanheng wanted to bully her, he would just drag her out in the middle of the night, impose devil training on her, exhaust her strength, watch her lie on the ground exhausted, and then wait for her to beg for mercy. Or perhaps it was his honesty, his coldness and ruthlessness to others, his high spirits, and his patience with her. At that time, he only had eyes for her. As long as she passed by, his eyes would follow her. However, at this moment, the expressionless man standing at the top of the stairs was wearing a black combat uniform. He had neat short hair and handsome facial features. It was as if he was still the same person as before, but at the same time, he seemed to be different. His hair used to be very short, but now it seemed to be much shorter and neat. Compared to 9 months ago, when he looked too thin and haggard when he was seriously injured, now he looked the same as before. He just stood there straight and looked like he was hiding a hidden sense of strength. His temperament seemed to be different. It cannot be said that it was temperament. It could only be said that when he stood in front of her, his gaze and the attitude he exuded were indifferent and distant. He stood there expressionlessly, his eyes meeting hers in midair. There was no sadness or joy, as if he was looking at a stranger. This kind of gaze reminded Feng Ling of the dinner party she attended with the Ted couple a few months ago. At that time, his eyes were also like this, but there was no emotion in his eyes. They were so cold that she wondered if there would be a second person in this world who looked exactly like him. Otherwise, how could he be so cold? Now seeing him standing here, the numbness in Feng Ling's legs disappeared, and she stood up straight. Thousands of thoughts flashed through her mind, but it only took a few seconds. She looked at him and said directly, "I heard that Mr. M.O. is going to choose a capable person from 11 Base to go to High City to protect Mrs. Mo's safety. After all, Mrs. M.O. is a woman. It will be more convenient to have a female bodyguard by her side. I plan to go to High City to take over this bodyguard job. Give me your signature." After speaking, Feng Ling retracted her gaze, tried to calm down, and continued to stand there. "As long as you give me your signature, I can leave immediately." Li Nanheng looked at her indifferently and then moved his gaze away from her. He walked straight over, but did not stand in front of her. Instead, he brushed past her, came to the door of his room, opened the door, and entered without looking back. Then he closed the door without saying a word. Feng Ling stood outside the door and stared blankly for more than 10 seconds. Her heart skipped a beat, and the calmness that she had just maintained on her face collapsed in an instant. "Remember what you said today." The words that the man said hoarsely in her ear before he was seriously injured and fainted echoed in her ears again. It was a brief brush with each other, as if they were strangers separating the past from the present, forming a boundary between the past and the present. Please remember this book's domain name. For mobile version website, Chapter 1070. Feng Ling's heart surged, and she looked at the closed door in front of her again. But the door was still closed. It was as if what she had said and what he had said had been verified. Nothing had happened. No love, no existence. Even though she was prepared, Feng Ling looked down at the document in her hand, thinking that she had been waiting for him for so many days, and still went up to knock on the door. After knocking a few times, she put down her hand and waited for a while. It was quiet inside, and no one came to open the door. After waiting for another 2 minutes, she raised her hand and knocked a few more times. After repeating this for about a few minutes, the door finally opened. The man stood in the door. He had already taken off his uniform jacket and stood inside in only a black short-sleeved t-shirt. He still looked at her indifferently, not like the person who used to look at her with warm and fiery eyes, but the devil boss Lee in others' mouths. There was no trace of smile on his face, and his eyes were so indifferent that she couldn't find any trace of extra emotion. The man put one hand in his trouser pocket. Even in a relaxed state, the lines of his arm faintly outlined the outline of his muscles. Under his gaze, Feng Ling felt that she was duckweed on the sea, helpless. Her heart that she thought was calm suddenly fluctuated, and she couldn't find a foothold. She told herself that she was just going to sign and leave, go far away to High City. Whether he loved her or hated her now, she put aside the old grudges for the time being. Right now, the most important thing was to let him sign and let her leave smoothly. But under his cold gaze, her heart inevitably sank. Feng Ling raised the document in her hand and held it to his eyes. "Boss, I want to go to High City. Sign this for me." The document in front of him blocked his face and also successfully blocked her face. However, the man didn't respond. After holding it for a while, Feng Ling put down the document and raised her eyes to meet his gaze. Then she suddenly wondered if it was because of the serious injury 9 months ago, or something happened to him in recent months that caused his facial paralysis. Was it love, hate, anger, or resentment? Just say it. Why was he so indifferent? Feng Ling held the document in her hand and looked straight at him. "The high-ranking military officials will arrive at the base in half an hour. I'm going to take a shower now. If you want to wait, just wait outside. Don't bother me by knocking on the door." Li Nanheng stood there as steady as a mountain. His tone was as cold as ice. He looked away from her face and closed the door. Feng Ling, who was almost hit in the nose by the door, she retracted her gaze, took a few steps back, and returned to her previous position to wait. Since the people from the military would arrive in half an hour, he wouldn't take too long to shower. It would be the same to wait for him to come out. No matter how cold his attitude was, she just needed to get his signature. Not long after, Li Nanheng came out after changing his clothes. The man's hair was very short and dried quickly, but when he came out, he smelled of shower gel. Feng Ling stepped forward and handed him the document again. Li Nanheng looked at the thing she handed over in her hand that suddenly blocked his way. His eyes were sharp and cold. When Feng Ling met his eyes, her heart that had just calmed down began to tremble again. She couldn't understand why her heart was in such turmoil. "I just wanted to sign something." Feng Ling looked at him and said, "Sign it." The next second, Li Nanheng asked expressionlessly and glanced at her hands. "Did you bring a pen?" Feng Ling was startled. She seemed to have been holding the document and didn't bring a pen. "Don't you have a pen in your room? I'm in a hurry to see the high-ranking military officials. I have something important to discuss." "He has already arrived. Do you think I'll waste time signing with you here or go back to open the door to help you find a pen? It'll only take a minute or two." The man no longer looked at her but walked toward the stairs. Feng Ling looked at the man's indifferent back and quickly followed. "Li Nanheng, let's talk." The man didn't stop walking. He had no intention of talking. She followed his footsteps and walked out, saying, "After I left 11 Base, I didn't plan to come back. I know I can come back now, and I've won back the face I lost at that time. You must have helped me a lot, but I've already left, and there's no need for me to come back. If you force me to come here, it will make things difficult for all parties. I really want to work for Mr. Mo, and Mrs. Mo needs someone to protect her. The man's footsteps suddenly stopped, and she also stopped in time to avoid bumping into his back. Li Nanheng looked back at her indifferently, his eyes cold. "It's my business whether to do it or not. It's your business whether to go back or not. No one will force you. Leave or stay, it's up to you. Leave or stay." These words sounded calm when they came out of his mouth, but seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. Feng Ling's heart instantly fluctuated, and she couldn't calm down. Feng Ling stood there and looked at him, but the man didn't stay any longer and left. She stood for a while and looked at his back. Seeing that he was indeed walking in the direction of the base's conference room, she took a look at the time and found that she couldn't delay any longer. Feng Ling lowered her head and looked at the document in her hand that she had yet to receive his signature. She then looked at the man's cold and arrogant back and recalled his gaze on her when he said that she could stay or leave as she pleased. Feng Ling didn't know why she suddenly felt a burning sensation in her throat, and a corner of her heart collapsed. In the past 9 months, she almost forgot that Li Nanheng didn't plan to see her again in the hospital. She didn't expect that when they met again after returning to 11 Base, he really didn't want to see her. That expression, that tone, that look in his eyes. There was disgust in his indifference. Han Jin saw this scene not far away. When Li Nanheng walked far away, he looked at the things in Feng Ling's hand and then at Feng Ling, who seemed to be in a bad situation. Boss really has something to do today. Why don't you look for him tomorrow? Feng Ling was silent for a moment and smiled. It's okay. When can he finish talking with the people from the military? I'll wait for him here. Are you in such a hurry to go to High City? It's uncomfortable to stay in the base for one more day. No, I think it's necessary to talk to him. Talk about what? Han Jin glanced at her indifferently. 9 months ago in the jungle of Boston, didn't you say that you would never talk to him? Do you think Bosley will talk to you? Please remember the domain name of this book. For mobile version website, M. Chapter 1071. She didn't regret what she said at that time. It was just that Feng Ling didn't expect that what she said at that time was really a sharp sword to Li Nanheng, hurting others but also hurting herself. Feng Ling stood there expressionlessly. Han Jin looked at her again and glanced at the document in her hand. Are you really going to High City? I don't know. I can go anywhere. You mean as long as you don't go back to 11 Base, you're willing to be sent to the African refugee area? Feng Ling didn't answer, but it was clear that this was what she meant. Even if she hesitated now, at least this was what she meant these days. Han Jin probably saw the bitterness in her heart and saw that she was humiliated by grandfatherly in public. So he softened his tone and said gently, all right, in fact, it's just a matter of signing. When boss is done with his work, he will definitely sign it for you. If you want to go to other places, he may not necessarily let you go. But since you're going to Mr. Mo's place, there's nothing to worry about. It's just that your attitude is too tough. You and Boss Lee are now fighting each other head-on. One is stubborn, and the other is not good-tempered. You have to go through the process of signing the permission to leave the country. Since you are now on the base, just wait patiently, or you can soften your attitude a little, and he will let you go. At this time, someone came over and said a few words to Han Jin. Han Jin nodded and said, I'll be right there. Then he glanced at Feng Ling again. When he walked past her, he raised his hand and patted her gently on the shoulder. Since you're already standing in 11 Base, I have to tell you something. Take it as a reminder. Since returning from Boston, Bosley has never mentioned your name again. Feng Ling was silent for a moment and smiled. Why did he mention my name? There is no need to mention it. The corner of Han Jin's mouth twitched. You really don't know how different he was when he was looking for you in the past 2 years and how different he was in the past 9 months. I just want to tell you that when Bosley loves you and wants to bear everything for you, he has enough ability to shelter you from the wind and rain. But if Bosley digs you out of his heart and eyes now, it will be difficult for you to see him, let alone to pave the way for you or shelter you from the wind and rain. After that, Han Jin looked at the time again and left. Feng Ling stood in place and looked in the direction where Han Jin left. Yes, it was indeed difficult for her to see Li Nanheng now. The senior military officials held a meeting in the base for the entire afternoon and didn't finish until 4 o'clock in the evening. The news Kay brought to Feng Ling was that the base would hold a banquet to entertain the senior military officials tonight. Bosley would spend most of his time in the base hall or in the special reception room of the base. He wouldn't return to his residence until very late. If she wanted to wait for him, she'd better change places. And there were a lot of things to be discussed in this meeting. Bosley might not have the patience to pay attention to her, so she had to be prepared. He was busy, so Feng Ling wouldn't pester him. But after being ignored in the base for several days, she really felt that it was better to get the pain over with. He could immediately sign the papers and let her go. He could do whatever he wanted, and she wouldn't say a word. Why do you have to keep her in the base and not let her go? Feng Ling went to the base hall, but didn't see him. She went to the reception room, but didn't see him either. But she was sure that Li Nanheng would stay in the base for the next 2 days and wouldn't go out for the time being. She simply returned to the sniper team to play sniper games with Kay and the others when he was particularly busy today and didn't go to see him again. The next day, when the military people left, Feng Ling came to Li Nanheng's door again with the documents that needed to be signed. Li Nanheng came out of the door in the morning. When he passed by her, he didn't even look at her face, nor did he give her a chance to speak. His cell phone rang, and he picked up the phone and walked out without looking back. Feng Ling followed behind him, and Li Nanheng didn't look back the whole time. Then he was suddenly stopped by the drill master of Team 4, who said that there was a problem with the newcomers of Team 4 and boss needed to go over to have a look. Then Li Nanheng was intercepted by the drill master of Team 4. After that, Feng Ling didn't find Li Nanheng in the canteen, in the training camp of each team, and on every road he might pass by. That afternoon, Dr. Qin called. "Little Feng Ling, have you settled it?" "Not for the time being." "Why? He won't sign it?" "He ignores me." Feng Ling's tone was a bit flat, but there was a hint of hidden anger in it. Then she seemed to hear Qin's sightings chuckle on the other side of the phone. "At first, he couldn't wait to hang you on his body and walk around all day for fear that you would catch a cold. Now he ignores you and refuses to let you go. Then I think we better look for other people in your base." The point is that Mo Jingshin doesn't intend to find a male bodyguard at all. He wants a woman to accompany his wife. He originally planned to hire you, but if there are any changes to your side, it will be really difficult to find a female bodyguard similar to you. I'll work harder. If I can't, I'll sneak over. I wouldn't go so far as to sneak in. Initially, I only gave you a suggestion to come out and change to a new environment. Seeing that you agreed so readily, I put this matter at ease and mentioned it to Mo Jingshin. Qin's sighting said with a smile, "But if Nanheng refuses to let you go, let alone me, even if Mo Jingshin comes in person and puts a knife to his neck, he may not let you go. He doesn't have any reason not to let me go." In recent months, Nanheng often goes to High City and spends more time in High City than in the United States. Recently, because of Grandfather Li's physical condition, he rushed back and doesn't know when he will return to High City. I think it's better for you to go with him when he is about to leave the country. He won't leave you alone at the airport. You said that even if I put a knife to his neck, he may not let me go. Even if I pester him to the airport, will he still take me on the plane? That's true. First, he won't compromise so easily. Second, you won't pester him. Both of their tempers were hard to deal with. One was cautious and closed his heart, and the other was a man of his word. Please remember this book's domain name. 4M. Chapter 1072. In fact, it didn't matter whether she went to High City or not. But when her temper was really stubborn, she became obsessed with the matter of Li Nanheng's signature. Even if she couldn't see him, she still had to see him. He didn't go back to his residence or the canteen. Well, he had to go to the bathroom. Every day, he only went to these places, but most of the bathrooms in the base were in the middle area. The passages outside led to various training camps, but no matter which side he came from, he still had to go to the largest and most spacious bathroom in the middle. The one he often visited was also the one in the middle. No matter how a person was, this habitual way of life wouldn't change. He would definitely go to this bathroom. Feng Ling simply went to the bathroom to stop him. Since the morning, she had been in the bathroom. Of course, she tried not to let others find her. In the past, there was only a men's bathroom in the base. Later, because of her, a guest bathroom was set up next to the men's bathroom. On the surface, it was because of the occasional female officers in the military, so the one-way arrangement was really inconvenient. So another bathroom was set up, but in fact it was also because of Feng Ling's incident that they were reminded of something. Feng Ling had been staying in the bathroom next door, and the people in the training camp all went to the bathroom opposite, so no one could find her. Feng Ling didn't need to poke her head out to see every time. She was very familiar with Li Nanheng's footsteps. She could tell whether he came in or not through the wall. Just when Feng Ling silently read the document in her hand for almost the 100th time, she finally heard the man's footsteps. Hearing him approaching, she walked out of the bathroom. Li Nanheng did come to the bathroom to pee. Looking at the woman who suddenly jumped out of the next room, he didn't change his expression, but just looked at her indifferently. "You came to the bathroom to stop me?" Feng Ling didn't explain, but handed him the pen and paper in her hand. "Sign it." Seeing that she even brought a pen this time, Li Nanheng glanced at her coldly, ignored her, and turned into the men's bathroom. Feng Ling was not in a hurry. He wouldn't stay in the bathroom forever. Sure enough, a few minutes later, the man came out and was blocked by Feng Ling looking at her persistent expression. Li Nanheng sneered, took the pen and paper, and asked her, "Are there wolves, tigers, and leopards in 11 base?" She didn't answer, but in her heart, 11 base has you. Although she didn't say it, the man clearly understood what she meant. Without another word, he placed the paper on the wall outside the bathroom door and signed his name. He threw the pen and paper into her arms and strode out without looking back. When he was almost out the door, he said indifferently, "I'll fly to High City in 2 days. Come with me." Feng Ling looked at the document in her hand that had already been signed by him and was just about to heave a sigh of relief when she abruptly raised her eyes to look at the man's back. Go with him. He's going to High City. With him. Feng Ling didn't understand what he meant. She stood there and forgot to agree or refuse. She also forgot to say anything else. She just watched the man's back as he walked away. 2 days later, Los Angeles X International Airport. Previously, every time Feng Ling went on a mission with the base, even if it was to other countries such as Cambodia, she usually took the base's helicopter to fly there. This was the first time she took an ordinary commercial plane and didn't know much about the situation in the airport. In the morning, when Li Nanheng said he was going to the airport, she took a look at the time and wondered if it was too early. However, Li Nanheng just carried her suitcase away with a cold face and got into the car without even explaining. Feng Ling had to follow him. When she arrived at the airport, she learned that even the first-class cabin needed to pass the security check and prepare enough time in advance. However, there were not many people in the first-class security check channel. After entering the waiting hall, she followed Li Nanheng all the way into the first-class lounge. While sitting on the sofa waiting for the plane, Feng Ling looked at the time again. There was still an hour before boarding. It was really troublesome to take a commercial plane. Unlike the helicopter in a base, she could directly fly away. As calm as Feng Ling was, she looked for a bathroom in this strange and overly large waiting hall for a long time. When she finally found one, she couldn't help complaining in her heart. This time, Xiao Su also went to High City with him. Seeing that Feng Ling had left for so long, Xiao Su couldn't help asking, "Where did you go?" "To find a bathroom," Feng Ling answered. "Xiao Su, why did you take so long to find the bathroom?" "The waiting hall is very big. I walked a long way to find it." Xiao Su couldn't help looking back at the 2 luxurious and high-end bathrooms in the first-class waiting room. "There's one here. How far did you go?" Feng Ling turned to look in the direction Xiao Su pointed. Sure enough, there were 2 on the side closest to here. The bathrooms in the airport are usually very close to each other. You'll meet one every few steps. Did you not see the sign clearly? Feng Ling, she had never been to a normal airport, let alone a large international airport like Los Angeles. She did walk for a long time and didn't look at the signs on both sides. She just kept looking for a sign indicating whether there was a bathroom or not. She looked for a long time, but didn't see a sign. Finally, she turned around and suddenly saw a bathroom next to her. So, she went in. Xiao Su couldn't help but smile when he saw her expression. She usually had a cold and indifferent face, but now she looked a little adorable because of this little embarrassing thing. Then he turned to look at Li Nanheng, who had been sitting on the sofa without speaking, only to see that Boss Li was still silently looking at the magazine in his hand. He didn't even look away. Xiao Su didn't know if he had heard their conversation or not. Seeing that Boss was so cold as if it had nothing to do with him, Xiao Su couldn't continue to laugh, quickly stopped smiling, turned to pour 2 glasses of water, and put them in their hands. Feng Ling sat back on the sofa and didn't look at Li Nanheng. For her, she was in a High City, but she didn't expect that after so many days, he finally signed the contract. But when he was also going to High City, it became a partnership. She refused to go back to 11 base. Didn't he know who she was hiding from? Outside the waiting hall, the sun was shining. Feng Ling didn't look at the man's cold face, lest they would freeze each other to death, so she turned her eyes to the sun outside. Please remember the domain name of this book. 4M. Chapter 1073. When boarding the plane, Xiao Su walked in front with his suitcase. Although they were all first class, Xiao Su sat in the seat near the window. After getting on the plane, he asked the flight attendant for a blanket, a blindfold, and headphones, and directly fell asleep there without a sound. There were many passengers on this direct flight from Los Angeles to High City, but there were only 4 seats in the advanced first-class cabin. Xiao Su slept in the back, and there was no one sitting in the other seat. Feng Ling and Li Nanheng sat on the same side, and their seats were next to each other, and Feng Ling was leaning against the window. After the plane took off and stabilized, she saw that the seat next to Xiao Su was empty. After a moment of hesitation, she was about to get up and go there. However, the flight attendant in the first-class cabin who specialized in serving them said with a polite smile, "Miss, I'm sorry. The first-class seat must be strictly according to the seat on your boarding pass." Hearing this, Feng Ling didn't move and returned to her seat to sit down, but Li Nanheng was by her side. Even though he hadn't spoken and had been reading the English newspaper on the plane, she still felt uncomfortable. After hiding from him for so many days, she finally got the signature and could leave, but she flew to High City with him. Although they didn't talk during the whole flight, the feeling of sitting on the plane together was really strange. After flying for a while, the flight attendant handed them a delicate menu and asked them to order. Feng Ling didn't know that there was such a service on the plane. She didn't know the difference between the first-class cabin and the brokerage cabin. She took a look at the menu and was about to speak when she heard the man next to her say lightly, "Red wine." Was there red wine? She looked at the menu in her hand carefully and turned it over. Sure enough, she saw the words "red wine" on the back. Xiao Su woke up because he wanted to eat, so he took off the blindfold and headphones. At this time, he turned around and saw Feng Ling holding the menu over there. She seemed to be a little calm, but in fact, she was still very cute. He smiled, ordered a few things, and returned the menu to the flight attendant. Then he leaned back in his seat, thinking about whether to continue wearing the blindfold and headphones while waiting for the meal. He had been sleeping for so long just now and tried to pretend that he didn't exist so as not to disturb them, but it seemed that it didn't work. Not only did the two of them not communicate a word, but Feng Ling even wanted to sit with him just now. Bosley was really tolerant. He refused to sign the contract a few days ago because he was worried about her flying to High City alone, so he finally dragged her down and personally accompanied her to High City, but he still kept a cold face all the way as if it had nothing to do with him. Xiao Su tooted in his heart, but didn't dare to show any change on his face. Feng Ling also ordered a few dishes. As for the drinks, she wanted to see how Li Nanheng's red wine was. If it looked good, she would also order a bottle. While waiting for the meal, Li Nanheng got up and went to the bathroom. Coincidentally, when he left, the meal Feng Ling ordered had been delivered. There was also a bottle of red wine, which was placed on the same tray. Feng Ling knew that these things didn't seem to cost money. Could it be that they saw that she didn't have anything to drink and specially gave her a bottle of red wine? She didn't check if the table in front of Li Nanheng was empty. Anyway, he didn't care about his affairs. She picked up a knife and fork and ate something. It tasted good. Then she opened the red wine bottle, poured it into the delicate goblet on the plate, and took a sip. It tasted good. It had the taste of wine and was very sweet. It was a very pure red wine. Although she didn't know much about wine, she knew that it was a very famous brand in the American wine industry from the words on the bottle. It was said that it would take more than 10 hours to fly to High City, China. Feng Ling knew that her alcohol tolerance was not very good, but there was really nothing to do on the plane. She extended the time she took to eat and occasionally took a sip to kill time. When Li Nanheng came back, he saw that his red wine was on her side. He just glanced at it and didn't say anything. The flight attendant came over and asked him in a low voice if he wanted another bottle. He waved his hand, indicating that he didn't need it, sat down, and picked up the magazine again. Feng Ling didn't look at him, and he didn't look at her. A long time passed. When Li Nanheng was about to change the magazine, he glanced at the wine bottle in front of her out of the corner of his eye. It was almost empty. Looking at the almost empty red wine bottle, Li Nanheng raised his eyebrows and turned to look at Feng Ling. The little woman with short hair was blushing at this moment, but she obviously didn't know it. She killed time and unknowingly drank the whole bottle of wine. This kind of wine had a strong after effect. She didn't feel much when she just drank it. At least she felt that she was still sober. Although she was sober, she gradually felt a little sleepy. After asking the flight attendant to remove all the things in front of her, Feng Ling felt that the after effect of the wine had taken effect, and her sleepiness became more and more obvious. She didn't know if she could sleep a little longer, but as long as she fell asleep, the more than 10 hours of sitting by Li Nanheng's side would be shortened a lot. She allowed the drowsiness to overwhelm her and closed her eyes. When the flight attendant came back, she saw that she seemed to be asleep and was about to bring a thin blanket to cover her. However, as soon as she came back with the thin blanket, she saw that Miss Feng, who was sleeping on the seat, unknowingly fell to the side by the window. Just as her head was about to hit the window, the handsome man next to her suddenly stretched out his arm to protect her head. Miss Feng, who was sleeping, began to fall to the other side because of inertia and instinct because of being suddenly blocked by his palm, until her head directly leaned on the shoulder of the man next to her. This scene seemed to happen a little unexpectedly, but inexplicably, it seemed to be very harmonious. The flight attendant looked at the man who had been wearing a cold face all the time. Seeing that his face didn't improve at this moment, there seemed to be a flash of softness between his eyebrows. Because of the flight attendant's curious gaze, he turned to look at her indifferently, reached out to take the thin blanket, and motioned for her to go. The flight attendant nodded and hurriedly stepped back. Then she saw that the man covered Miss Feng with the blanket and didn't push her head away. He even tilted his slightly higher position to make it more comfortable for her to lean on. The flight attendant was a little dumbfounded. Although the two of them boarded the plane together, they didn't seem to communicate with each other. Weren't they strangers? They looked like a young couple quarreling and having a Cold War. There's a Chinese romance finals in Hangzhou. Papa will take the time to help Qingqing's book. The time for the release of chapters should be February 4th. Yes, on New Year's Eve, I will also hold the computer and write chapters hard. Please remember the domain name of this book. 4M. Chapter 1074. Feng Ling leaned on Li Nanheng's shoulder and fell asleep unknowingly. Her body was filled with the mellow fragrance of red wine, and her usually cold face was not as cold and stern as usual. Instead, she looked relaxed as she slept. Xiao Su vaguely felt that something was wrong. Although it was very quiet just now, it felt different from now. He forced himself to pretend to be invisible and try to sleep, but he still couldn't fall asleep. He quietly lifted the blindfold and glanced at the two seats on the other side of the aisle. When he saw them, his eyes immediately lit up. He threw away the blindfold and turned his head to take a closer look at Feng Ling, who was sleeping soundly on Boss Li's shoulder. Feeling the gaze from next door, Li Nanheng didn't look at him but still sat there and read a magazine expressionlessly. But even though there was no warmth on his face, in order to make Feng Ling more comfortable, he had already laid down a little. This change was very obvious. Xiao Su snickered and withdrew his gaze. Gee, it seemed that flying for more than 10 hours was not without any sense of accomplishment. At least it could melt the stiff relationship between the two of them a little bit. Sir, would you like to order a glass of red wine? Seeing that he didn't sleep, the flight attendant came over and asked kindly in a low voice. Xiao Su froze for a moment and then looked at Feng Ling, who was sleeping over there. Did she drink red wine before falling asleep? Xiao Su now realized that the 3 first-class passengers should know each other, so he nodded. Yes. Xiao Su raised his eyebrows. How much did she drink? A whole bottle. The flight attendant smiled. We were going to pour a glass for that gentleman, but I went to the broker's cabin to help him. When I came back, I saw that this lady had drunk a lot. That gentleman didn't say anything, so I didn't stop her. Fortunately, the flight time is relatively long. She can sleep like this and wake up after the plane lands, so we didn't wake her up. A whole bottle? How much did Feng Ling not want to sit together with Boss Li for more than 10 hours? She clearly knew how bad her alcohol tolerance was, but she actually quietly drank an entire bottle by herself. Then again, the flight attendant didn't dare to stop her. Boss Li was watching by the side, but didn't he stop her? Or did Boss Li order this wine for her? Xiao Su couldn't help but look in that direction again. Li Nanheng was silent the whole time. Even when Xiao Su turned to look at him with his mouth wide open, he ignored him. He looked cold and aloof. "Boss." When the flight attendant left, Xiao Su asked in a low voice, "Feng Ling's alcohol tolerance is so poor. Although we still have to fly for more than 10 hours, are you sure she can wake up after the plane lands?" Li Nanheng said lightly, "Didn't High City arrange a car to pick you up? There will be a car to pick her up. If she doesn't wake up, are you going to carry her out yourself?" "Yes." "Huh, then I understand. Boss, you're really good at playing tricks. You forced her to come to High City with you and pretended to be cold and indifferent. But in fact, every step the little girl took was under your control. You've learned from Mr. Mo. You're really good at playing tricks." Li Nanheng paused and glanced at him. "What tricks did I play? I'm not an immortal. How can I be so accurate? Don't flatter me. You're not an immortal, but Mr. Mo is. Mr. Mo has already said that if he doesn't take Feng Ling away from you, you'll probably die in his hands. Give her something to do, and it'll give you some time to think about the recent arms business." Xiao Su chuckled as he spoke. He couldn't tell whether Boss Li or Mr. Mo was better. Anyway, when this group of people stood together, it was like a fight between immortals, and each of their means was more advanced than the other. He's not smart. His purpose is to find someone he can trust to protect his wife. There's only one woman in the entire 11 base. Who else can he choose if not Feng Ling? Li Nanheng didn't have the time to pay attention to Xiao Su. He just turned the page of the magazine in his hand and continued to read. "Ahem, I was almost fooled by you a few days ago. Now, it seems that you already knew about this arrangement, but you deliberately dragged her to go with you today. Are you afraid that she will get lost in the airport? That's right. That's right. After all, she has never taken a normal plane. She is too inexperienced, so I can't rest assured. Let's not talk about feelings. I watch her grow up. I can't let her get lost in the airport. Otherwise, it will be the shame of our 11 base." Li Nanheng was still looking at the magazine in his hand, and his tone was very indifferent. "Tut, tut, 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 tut." Xiao Su clicked his tongue several times in his heart. He was so sour that his teeth were about to fall off. When Feng Ling left the base, you looked for her for 2 years. Later, when she went to Boston, you probably didn't have a chance to have a good talk with her. Then in the next 9 months, it's even more indescribable. Now she finally sits next to you, and there's nowhere for her to run or escape on the plane. It's rare that you can have a good talk with her. Why did you let her drink so much?" Li Nanheng's eyes were very indifferent. "I have nothing to say." "Then after you send her to High City, you really plan to leave her alone?" Li Nanheng glanced at him coldly and ignored him. Xiao Su suddenly saw that Feng Ling's head, which was resting on his shoulder, seemed to move at this moment. He immediately shut his mouth, lest she heard what she shouldn't hear. Feng Ling did not wake up. Although it was comfortable to lean against him, after a long time, she still felt that her neck was a little sore. She moved her head slightly and rubbed her cheeks that were flushed from the alcohol against Li Nanheng's shoulder. She did not find the right position. Just as she found a comfortable position to continue sleeping, her head suddenly lowered and she almost hit the armrest of the chair. Li Nanheng raised his hand to protect her head in time, stroked her forehead, lifted her head, and pushed her back to the seat to continue sleeping. However, Feng Ling, who was asleep, was still subconsciously looking for a more comfortable sleeping position. Her head slowly fell to the left of the seat bit by bit until it leaned against his shoulder again. Li Nanheng lowered his eyes to look at the little woman who only knew to rely on him after she fell asleep. He thought that in order to leave 11 base, in order to run far away from him, in order to get his signature, this woman even dared to block him in the bathroom. Please remember the domain name of this book. 4M. Chapter 1075. Li Nanheng raised his hand and pushed her head away, letting her lean back on the seat again. However, after only a few minutes, Feng Ling stubbornly frowned uncomfortably in her sleep, suddenly stretched out her hand, hugged his arm hard, and rested her head on his shoulder again. This time, she wrapped her arms around his body until she found a comfortable position against him and slowly relaxed her frown. Xiao Su watched silently by the side, and then he saw that Boss Li, who had been cold-faced, was irritated by Feng Ling's action of holding his arm. When they arrived at High City, it was 4 o'clock in the morning in China. Xiao Su was right. Feng Ling had not woken up yet. It was probably because the alcohol content of the red wine was not low. She had drunk so much, but she had been sleeping the whole time and had not woken up even after landing on the ground. Xiao Su volunteered to carry her off the plane, but of course, he didn't get this opportunity. The first-class cabin could get off the plane first, so it was not as crowded as the back. Li Nanheng carried Feng Ling and walked out, and the flight attendants couldn't help covering their mouths when they saw this scene. Her mother was also pillowed on her shoulder the whole time. She didn't even move a bit after that. She just let her lean on her and sleep like that. Now she was carrying her off the plane. Xiao Su struggled to drag the suitcases of the three of them and followed them with a bitter smile. Boss Li carried a person in his arms but still walked fast, but Xiao Su's 3 suitcases were extremely heavy. When they walked out of the airport arrival hall, there were already MO Corporation and 11 bases domestic personnel waiting there. Li Nanheng glanced at his watch and said, "Let's go to the hotel first." A group of energetic young men in suits with crew-cut hair shouted in unison, "Yes." Xiao Su handed the luggage to them and followed them into the car. Seeing Li Nanheng sit in the back row and put Feng Ling on the seat next to him, he grinned and asked, "Boss, you are really smart." Li Nanheng asked him why. "But if she comes to High City alone, it will be different. Mr. M.O. has so many bodyguards, many of whom are more powerful than her, and many of them are arranged by 11 base. Anyway, there will be a lot of decent men, especially those people just now. Many of them are Mr. Mo's henchmen. You are afraid that Feng Ling will be abducted in High City, so you carry her off the plane. Anyway, she doesn't know how to resist when she is drunk. In this way, everyone can see that Feng Ling has a special relationship with you, so no one dares to have any ideas about her, right?" The more Xiao Su spoke, the more he grinned, and he was proud that he could understand Boss Li's mind. The young man who was driving in the front suddenly said, "Mr. Li, please rest assured. We definitely don't dare to flirt with your woman." Li Nanheng glanced at the guy who was driving and said indifferently, "Focus on driving. Don't talk so much nonsense. Mo Jingshun begged this person from me. You have to treat him well, not flirt with him." "Okay," the young man who was driving said very seriously. "Yes, we will treat her well." Xiao Su coughed. "You don't have to be so serious. With Feng Ling's temper, if she is really treated well, she will probably run away first. This is not like the United States. If she really runs away, I don't think you will be able to find her again, boss." Before Li Nanheng spoke, the young man who was driving suddenly said seriously, "Mr. Li, the MO Corporation treats her very well, and the food is good. Mrs. MO is very kind and will never bully her. Miss Feng will definitely work well and live a happy life in High City. She won't have any thoughts of running away. You can rest assured that you will hand her over to us." Li Nanheng scolded coldly. "I'm afraid Jinwan can't beat her even if she wants to." In the car, the serious atmosphere because of his gloomy face was broken in an instant. The young man who was driving chatted with Xiao Su for a while and continued to drive. At nearly 5 o'clock in the morning, they arrived at a 7-star hotel in the center of High City. Li Nanheng carried Feng Ling, who was still drunk and unconscious, out of the car. Ignoring the curious eyes of the staff in the hotel, he carried her into the elevator and walked all the way to the room that had already been arranged. Xiao Su followed them to send the luggage in, but when he followed them out of the elevator, he saw Boss Li carrying the woman in his arms straight to the room. His mind sobered up, and he hurriedly dragged the suitcase back to the elevator to the lower floor, not daring to follow them again. Li Nanheng carried Feng Ling into the room. He didn't have time to insert the car to turn on the light, so he kicked the door shut and carried her to the bed inside. Although the light was not turned on, this was the bustling downtown area of High City. Outside the window, the neon lights could vaguely see the outline of people. Putting her down, Li Nanheng turned to turn on the light. The moment the light in the room came on, he looked back and saw Feng Ling lying on the bed in a daze. Knowing that she was a poor drinker, she still drank a whole bottle. Sure enough, she didn't want to spend so much time with him on the plane and would rather sleep in this way. If she really had no feelings and was really calm, why did she use this way to escape? Thinking of 9 months ago, when the two of them managed to escape in the jungle, she faced him and said that she had never loved him, which made Li Nanheng's body instantly covered with barbs. Now this woman was lying in front of him, and she couldn't even resist. He really wanted to put his hand on her neck and strangle her alive. Feng Ling was wearing sportswear, and the zipper was pulled up very high. Now that she was lying on the bed, the top of the zipper was stuck under her neck, and it seemed uncomfortable. Li Nanheng stood by the bed and looked at her coldly for a while, leaned down to help her pull down the zipper, and at the same time, he caught a glimpse of the small t-shirt she was wearing. Although it was not exposed from this angle, he could still see the bulge under her clothes. In the 3 years since she left 11 Base, she had never wrapped her chest with a cloth again. In the last period of puberty, her breasts were getting better and better, and even lying down couldn't hide the view of her chest. With her current figure, even if she wrapped hundreds of layers of chest wrappings, she might not be able to cover this outline and curve. Please remember the domain name of this book, 4M. Chapter 1076. Looking at the little woman lying on the bed, and then at the scenery in her zipper, Li Nanheng's Adam's apple moved slightly, and his hand hung on her face. He was about to help her take off the sportswear jacket, but he suddenly found that facing Feng Ling like this, it was very difficult for him to control himself. He paused, pulled the blanket over her, and took out a cigarette from his trouser pocket. He walked to the window, lit a cigarette, and held it between his fingers, letting it flicker on and off. It was said that smoking could distract people and make them sober, but the scenes of Feng Ling appearing in front of him from the age of 13 to now kept flashing in his mind, including the ruthless words she said with a cold expression 9 months ago. He really didn't want to have anything to do with her. But as long as this woman appeared in 11 Base, he found that he was already standing in the pit full of her name, and no matter how he climbed, he couldn't get out. Feng Ling seemed to smell the smoke, but it was not very strong, but she still opened her eyes subconsciously, but when she opened her eyes, she still felt dizzy. She couldn't see the European-style lights on the ceiling clearly, but she could see that there were lights on. She didn't know if it was morning or night, or where exactly she was. She couldn't even remember clearly when she took the plane to High City. She just stared at the dazzling lights in a daze. After a while, she struggled to sit up from the bed because she wanted to go to the toilet. Feng Ling supported herself with her hand on the bed and stood up unsteadily. She didn't know where the bathroom was, but she still walked a few steps in the room instinctively. She saw a partition door on the side that was not lit, and she staggered over. Her hand groped randomly on the wall, and it seemed to be a light switch. She pressed it, and sure enough, the inside was lit. The toilet and bathroom were separated by 2 translucent glass doors. She opened the door with the toilet and went straight in. Hearing the movement, Li Nanheng turned back and saw that the woman had woken up. She drank too much and only now knew that she needed to go to the toilet. However, when Feng Ling entered the toilet, she stood by the toilet for a long time but couldn't untie her pants. This kind of sports pants all had a belt on the front. She clearly remembered that it was not tight every time. Why couldn't she untie it this time? The bathroom and toilet of this hotel were translucent glass, and there was a door outside that could be pulled at any time. Now the door was not closed, so all her movements inside were seen by the man. Seeing that she stood by the toilet for a long time with her hand on her abdomen, Li Nanheng walked over. Feng Ling was still struggling with the tighter and tighter belt around her waist. Suddenly, she seemed to hear footsteps and suddenly felt an invisible sense of oppression coming from behind. She suddenly turned back, and her somewhat drunken and hazy eyes directly met the figure of the tall man standing in front of the door. As soon as she saw Li Nanheng's face, Feng Ling subconsciously thought that she was still in the stage of dressing as a man in 11 Base. She was a little confused as she tugged at the belt that seemed to be tied into a dead knot and said, "Boss, I can't untie the belt." Hearing her words and seeing that she was still completely sober, Li Nanheng raised his cold brows. "So, you help me." Feng Ling said as she staggered out of the toilet and stood in front of Li Nanheng. She leaned over with a confused expression, picked up the two ends of the belt with her two slender hands, and handed them to him. It seems to be tied into a dead knot. I can't untie it, and I can't take off my pants. I want to go to the toilet. I can't hold it in. When she spoke, her tongue could not straighten. It was not that she had never been drunk before, but this time, in order to fly safely on the plane, she really drank too much. The after effect of that kind of red wine was not ordinary, and this time, she was really drunk to a certain extent. Li Nanheng looked at the completely drunk woman in front of him, and then at the two belts that were stuffed into his hands. Let him help her untie the belt and take off her pants? Should he untie it or not? Or not? Seeing that he did not move, Feng Ling did not hesitate to tug down the waist of the tight pants. No, I really can't hold it in anymore. Boss, do you have scissors? If not, just cut it off. Li Nanheng pursed his lips and did not speak. Seeing that she was eager to go to the toilet, he raised his hand and pressed her shoulder, saying mildly, "Stand firm. Don't move." Okay. Feng Ling stood firm, with a blank expression, and then lowered her head with a pair of drunken eyes, only to see that the man's slender and well-defined fingers were untying the belt of her sports pants that had been tied into a dead knot. Originally, this bag was not tied into a dead knot at all. It was she who randomly pulled it a few times, causing it to become a dead knot. In addition, she was a little anxious and pulled it too hard. Right now, the knot was already firm, and it was indeed difficult to untie. Li Nanheng patiently helped her untie it, and when he untied it, he glanced at her unconscious expression. "Thank you, boss." Although her pants were untied, Feng Ling was still tongue-tied. She staggered and decisively turned into the bathroom again. When she closed the door and was about to sit on the toilet, she suddenly paused. Subconsciously, she felt that Boss Lee was still here. If she sat down to go to the toilet, wouldn't she be exposed? So she stood in front of the toilet and stood there for a long time as if she was going to go to the toilet. Li Nanheng would not even watch her go to the toilet. He turned around and was about to leave when he noticed that something was wrong. From the reflection outside the door, she seemed to be standing. He suddenly turned his eyes and saw that Feng Ling was standing in the toilet. His eyelids suddenly twitched. After watching her for a long time and seeing that she did not move, he opened the translucent glass door behind her. Seeing that she was still holding her pants, he frowned and asked, "Aren't you going to the toilet? What are you doing?" Feng Ling held the edge of the waist of her pants with both hands and looked back at him with some embarrassment. "Boss, do you know why I have to avoid you every time I go to the toilet?" Li Nanheng frowned. "What?" Feng Ling hiccuped and said, while holding back the urge to pee, "Because I feel inferior. After all, my one is not as big as yours, so every time I go to the toilet, I go in alone. So, boss, I'm going to the toilet now. Can you go out? Don't stand by and watch." Li Nanheng frowned and looked at this Feng Ling who had even messed up the time after drinking too much. He thought that she was in the state when she was disguised as a man in 11 base. Seeing that her fingers were clenched tightly on the waist of her pants because of the discomfort, the man suddenly sneered and leaned against the bathroom door. "How small is it? Take it out and let me see. Please remember the domain name of this book. 4M. Chapter 1077. Feng Ling was a little dazed. She watched as the man leaned against the door and watched as his arms were crossed. She paused for a moment before she pretended to take off her pants and said, "It's really too small. It's not easy to take it. Boss, let me go to the bathroom alone." "Didn't you say you feel inferior? Let me see how small you are and then tell you whether you need to feel inferior or not." The bathroom was very small. Even though the man stood by the door, his low voice seemed to be close to her ear. Feng Ling didn't dare to look at his face, so she simply didn't look at him. Standing in front of the toilet, she hesitated and hesitated. Anyway, she really hadn't seen the man's private part. She had only heard Kay and the others often talk about it, so she learned a few words from them. Now that she had her back to him, she shouldn't be able to see anything. She couldn't hold it anymore and simply took off her pants. Fortunately, her upper body was relatively long and could more or less cover some parts of the back. She didn't look at the man's eyes again and then searched there for a while. Anyway, she didn't find anything, but she still pretended to search and said, "Boss, I can't hold it anymore. You go out first." Li Nanheng looked at her slender and straight legs darkly. No matter how long her top was, it could only cover most of her buttocks, and the seductive lower part seemed to be tempting him to commit a crime. If he had known that a full bottle of red wine could make her so irrational, he should have drunk her long ago. The man was about to step forward when suddenly there was a knock on the door. Li Nanheng immediately closed the bathroom door with a dark expression and turned to open the door, only to see that the MO Corporation had sent someone over. The person who came was Shun Mu, MO Jingshin's trusted assistant. Shun Mu smiled politely outside the door. "Mr. Li, I heard that the female bodyguard arranged for Mrs. MO has landed in High City. I'll introduce her to Mrs. MO these days. Is it convenient for you to meet her now?" Li Nanheng's face was dark, and his tall figure stood in front of the door, not letting him see anything in the room. His voice was as cold as ice. "What time is it now?" Shun Mu raised his eyebrows. 5:30. 5:30 is work time. I purposely came earlier so that I can bring him to Mrs. Mo's place during working hours. That way, I won't waste any time, right? They just arrived. What's the hurry? Let's talk about it at dawn." Li Nanheng decisively closed the door. Shun Mu, who was blocked outside the door, was speechless. Damn, CEO MO and Mrs. MO were in the U Garden right now. He dutifully ran over early in the morning to contact the bodyguard. In the end, Li Nanheng had eaten explosives. He had heard that this female bodyguard seemed to have some relationship with Li Nanheng, but he didn't know the specifics. The whole world was bullying him for being single. Shun Mu turned around and was about to leave dejectedly when he saw Xiao Su, who had just come upstairs because he knew he was coming. After the two of them met face to face, Xiao Su almost laughed out loud when he saw Shun Mu's expression. "How is it? I told you not to come too early. You got scolded, right?" Shun Mu walked over and couldn't help complaining. "That's right. Your boss Li's temper is really hard to control. He's not as easy to talk to as our CEO, MO." Xiao Su was holding a cigarette in his mouth. When he heard this, he squinted at him and said meaningfully, Your CEO Mo's temper is so good that people often die without a burial place under his calm smile. You speak as if your boss, Li, hasn't scolded you a few times. TSK, you speak as if you haven't been frozen at Mr. Mo's place." The door closed again. Li Nanheng turned back to open the bathroom door, only to see that Feng Ling was still standing there hesitantly. It seemed that she didn't know how to go to the bathroom. Click! The bathroom door opened behind her, and she instantly stood up straight again. Her hand continued to reach forward. Li Nanheng's sharp gaze fell on her body. Seeing that she was not just pretending, he thought about how he had been deceived by her for so many years, and his expression changed drastically. Feng Ling was completely unaware of the man's thoughts at this moment. She turned to look at him innocently. "Boss, go to the bathroom." The moment she turned around, Li Nanheng looked away because she wasn't wearing any pants. This kind of thing would never happen if she was sober. She would never let it happen even if she was beaten to death. Oh, Feng Ling seemed to have almost forgotten whether she was a man or a woman. She stood in front of the toilet and was about to go to the toilet. Li Nanheng vaguely had a bad feeling. When he looked back and saw her suddenly standing there with her legs apart, the veins on his forehead bulged, and he suddenly shouted, "Sit down." Feng Ling was frightened by his cold roar, and her shoulders trembled. She was so scared that she quickly sat on the toilet. Only then did Li Nanheng close the bathroom door for her, turn around, and walk out of the bathroom cubicle. Not long after, he heard the sound of the toilet flushing. Li Nanheng stood outside and looked at the time. He was about to call Xiao Su to ask him to prepare breakfast. However, after he called Xiao Su, the little woman who was so drunk that she could not even tell whether she was a man or a woman had not come out. Li Nanheng stood outside for a moment, opened the door, and walked in. He saw that Feng Ling had already put on her pants, but she had covered the toilet lid, knelt by the toilet, and was sleeping soundly on the white lid. Li Nanheng's face instantly turned livid. He bent down, helped her up, carried her by the waist, turned to walk out, and put her back on the bed. As soon as her body landed on the bed, Feng Ling rubbed her head comfortably on the pillow and continued to sleep. She was so drunk that she had lost her usual vigilance. Or, no matter how much she repulsed him now, as long as he was by her side, she still felt a certain sense of security subconsciously, so she allowed herself to be so drunk. Li Nanheng lowered his head and saw that her trousers were a little loose because she had not fastened them after the belt was untied. Her clothes were also rolled up a little, revealing her flat and white lower abdomen. Perhaps because the man's gaze was too hot, Feng Ling opened her eyes slightly, but she could not see anything clearly. She only uttered an "in" with unclear emotions and fell asleep again. Chapter 1078. Her "in" caused the man's jaw to tighten. He stared at her, and the atmosphere seemed to be about to be torn apart. An oppressive feeling pressed down on her. Feng Ling instinctively tried to open her eyes, but she only opened them a little. She looked at the man in front of her in confusion. Li Nanheng's face appeared even more profound because of his lust. His handsome face was shrouded in the light, and a layer of shadow fell on her face. "Still not awake?" the man asked in a low voice. His voice was low and heavy. Feng Ling just looked at him and slowly blinked a few times. She looked at the man's deep eyes and kept looking at him. "Do you remember where you are now? Do you remember who I am? Do you remember your current situation?" The man looked at her deeply, and his narrowed black eyes emitted a sharp light. Feng Ling's state of consciousness was intermittent. She just looked at him, and there seemed to be many images overlapping in front of her eyes. In a corner of her heart that she had hidden, this man seemed to be shrouded in a layer of light that could not be ignored. It was as though he had fallen from the sky and intruded into her cold and dark heart. He had been in that place and had never left. However, she had erected a high wall to block his light. She forced herself to forget that hot and bright light, forget that he was in that corner and had never come out. The alcohol was stirring. Sometimes, under the catalysis of alcohol, the things in her mind would surge out and not be forcibly blocked. She suddenly smiled, and her eyes were filled with his reflection. She lay there and said hoarsely, "Li Nanheng, I like you." She couldn't see the light that suddenly jumped out of the man's cold eyes. She just stared at him and said numbly and mechanically, "But you're already married. The media wrote that you married the daughter of the Feng family. Who else could you have married if not Feng Mingzhu?" She then looked at him with a seemingly self-deprecating smile. "I like you very, very much. I like you so much that when I was kicked out of the base, I thought that I might as well give up my dignity, but..." She looked at him, and tears suddenly flashed at her eyes. Even if it was just a flash of tears, it showed that it was not that she couldn't cry. It was just that her self-control was too strong, and she swallowed all the grievances. "But I can't call you brother-in-law while shamelessly liking you." Li Nanheng was moved by her rare words, but because of her words, his eyes suddenly paused. "Brother-in-law? What brother-in-law?" However, in the next moment, the crying short-haired little woman suddenly raised her head and kissed him with her soft lips. However, she did not know how to kiss. Even though she had been kissed by him many times in the past, she did not know how to respond. However, at this moment, she clumsily tried to move her lips against his. Indeed, she was so clumsy that she did not even know how to use her tongue to pry open his mouth. All she knew was to call out to him and carefully suck on his lips. The trace of doubt in Li Nanheng's mind instantly collapsed because of his emotions. His back was stiff, his brows were deeply furrowed, and he looked down at her delicate and beautiful little face. He suddenly raised his hand to hold her chin and kissed her deeply without caring about anything else. Although Feng Ling always had short hair, her skin was very, very fair. Even when she was exposed to the sun and wind in the base, it did not affect her skin at all. It only made her look a little healthier than many fair-skinned girls. Her eyelashes were very long, and when she opened her eyes, they were very big and full of spirit. Every time she stared at those targets, absolute confidence and light bloomed in her eyes. When she closed her eyes, Her long eyelashes were like a pair of ink-colored wings, and when they flapped, it would move people's hearts. At this moment, these long and curled eyelashes kept trembling because of such a fierce kiss. Li Nanheng almost couldn't control himself. He pressed his body weight against her and kissed her deeply. At the same time, he couldn't help but put his hand into her rolled-up clothes and gradually moved up. At the same time, he held the back of her head to prevent her from subconsciously retreating because of the kiss. He went deep in her mouth, forcefully and fiercely, not giving her any chance to breathe. She said she liked him. What she said after she was drunk was the truth. Back then, she had said that she didn't like him and that she didn't love him. It was as if the knives that had been stabbed into his heart had been pulled out in an instant. Every wound had been healed by her tears and the words that she liked him. Just as he was unwilling to just touch her like this, he almost bit her lips and was about to completely unzip her blouse. The little woman who was trying hard to respond to him gradually lost her strength. When she stopped moving, he gradually stopped biting her lips and let go of her. He lowered his eyes to look at her, only to see that she actually kissed him and fell asleep again. However, when she fell asleep again because of the alcohol, there was still a tear hanging from the corner of her eye. Li Nanheng had never seen her cry, not even a drop of tear. Seeing the tears at the corner of her eyes, the taut string in his mind slowly loosened, and the emotions that had been accumulating for a long time also gradually relaxed. The desire and impulse that might have exploded on the spot if he didn't do her now also calmed down a little because of her tears. He slowly propped himself up from her body, looked at her sleeping face, looked at the tears at the corner of her eyes, and reached out to wipe the corner of her eyes. It was wet. It was real tears. Li Nanheng supported his arms on both sides of her body and let out a long breath. He sat up by her side and looked down at his desire that couldn't be concealed at all. He closed his eyes, got out of bed, and went straight into the bathroom. He quickly and decisively took a cold shower for a few minutes. After the shower, he put on his clothes. As he was buttoning his cuffs, he suddenly remembered what Feng Ling called him brother-in-law. Brother-in-law, Feng Mingzhu. What did this have to do with the fact that when he got married, he agreed not to inform Renbaoren, but was mysteriously exposed in the media? What brother-in-law? Li Nanheng was a little puzzled. After showering, he looked at the little woman who was still asleep on the bed. He saw that she was still sleeping in the same position. Chapter 1079. If you didn't marry Feng Mingzhu, who else could it be? I can't call you brother-in-law while shamelessly liking you. These two sentences repeated in his mind. At a certain moment, Li Nanheng looked at Feng Ling's face, and his eyes suddenly froze. A possibility that he had never thought of, or even dared to think of, was about to explode in his mind. When Mrs. Feng, Qin Xiu, and her mother saw Feng Ling for the first time, they grabbed her hand and kept asking her if she was a man or a woman and how old she was. Later, when Qin Xiu's mother met him, she casually asked him why Feng Ling didn't come and asked him a lot about Feng Ling. He used to think that the old lady only cared about Feng Ling because she had helped her. Besides, the old lady always cared about children of Feng Ling's age, so he never thought much about it. Why did Feng Ling coincidentally have the surname Feng? This surname was not common in the United States. If there was no reason, an orphan would not have such a surname. She thought he married Feng Mingzhu, so she said she wanted to call him brother-in-law. The cenotaph that he had been married to for 3 years had been decided by him and the Li family. Soon, it would be the time when he could completely regain his freedom after being married for 3 years. The poor second daughter of the Feng family fell into the sea and disappeared at the age of 1. No one believed that it was possible for a 1-year-old child to survive in the vast sea. All kinds of things condensed in Li Nanheng's mind and then exploded little by little. He looked at Feng Ling, who was sleeping, and for the first time in his life, he was so nervous and excited that his palms were sweating. It was already 6:30 a.m., and the breakfast that Xiao Su asked someone to prepare had already been delivered. Xiao Su took the dining cart and pushed it to the door. Just as he was about to knock on the door in front of him suddenly opened. He thought he came at the wrong time. What did boss look like? Was he going to be scolded like Special Assistant Shin? However, Li Nanheng only glanced at the breakfast on the dining car and said indifferently, "When she wakes up, arrange for her to see Mrs. M.O. I'm going back to the United States." Ah, Xiao Su was startled. "Boss, haven't you already informed Mr. M.O. that you will personally send Feng Ling over? Right now, I have something more important to do. It's about my life. I need to go back and investigate it. You stay here and watch over her. Tell M.O. Jingshen that if she suffers even the slightest injury or grievance in High City, I won't care if his surname is M.O. or Bai. I'll take his life all the same." Xiao Su, what the hell? A great event in one's life since ancient times. The major event in a man's life has always been getting promoted, getting rich, and getting married. He definitely didn't need to get promoted and get rich. The position of the boss was already high enough, and he didn't lack money. That had to do with marrying a wife. Xiao Su looked confused, but Li Nanheng didn't wait for a moment. He walked around the dining car, brushed past Xiao Su expressionlessly, and walked out decisively. Xiao Su turned back to look at Boss Li's swift and decisive back, feeling somewhat confused. Then he pushed the dining car in, only to see that Feng Ling was still sleeping. The corner of Xiao Su's mouth twitched. He had to put the dining car aside. Thinking of what Boss Li said just now, he couldn't let Feng Ling suffer any grievances. He immediately gave up the idea of waking her up and went out to wait. Feng Ling drank on the plane yesterday and slept for the whole morning. She frowned slightly at the dazzling noon sun and turned over in bed. The sober consciousness in her mind gradually returned, and then she suddenly realized that she was on a plane and was about to go to High City. Where was she now? She abruptly opened her eyes and looked at the unfamiliar hotel room. Then, she abruptly sat up and looked around. There was no one else here. She was the only one here, sitting on the bed for a long time. She couldn't remember how she came to the hotel. Then she looked around and found her cell phone, only to see that it was already past 12 o'clock in the afternoon. Did she sleep for so long? How did she get off the plane? There was a knock on the door, and at the same time, Xiao Su's voice came from outside. "Feng Ling, haven't you woken up?" Feng Ling had a headache. She raised her hand and rubbed her forehead, but she couldn't remember what had happened. She staggered up from the bed and walked to the door to open it. Seeing that she was awake, Xiao Su smiled. "In the morning, before Boss left, he asked me to prepare breakfast for you, but you drank too much and didn't wake up until now. Breakfast can't be eaten. I'm going to ask someone to prepare something else for you. Go wash up, and I'll call you out to eat when it's ready." Feng Ling's hand was still on her head, and she looked at him in confusion. "How did I get off the plane? Do you think I carried you off the plane? Or did Boss Li carry you off the plane?" Xiao Su kept her in suspense. Feng Ling, she looked at Xiao Su for a while, thinking of Li Nanheng's indifferent attitude toward her recently. "Did you carry me?" Xiao Su looked at her exasperatedly. She was so stupid. No wonder her relationship with Boss Li was so bumpy. Boss Li didn't really intend to give her the cold shoulder. He was just angered by her. Couldn't she see that with Boss Li around? How could he let another man carry her? What a silly girl. Xiao Su tooted. "You guessed wrong. Hurry up and wash up. I can smell the wine in your mouth when I talk to you." Feng Ling took another step back. She was slightly embarrassed by the taste of wine in her mouth, but she really didn't expect that the bottle of red wine would have such a strong after effect. She had never fallen asleep so defenselessly and lost herself in her sleep. When Xiao Su left, she closed the door, thought about it, and turned to walk into the bathroom. When she passed by the bathroom, she glanced at the toilet in the bathroom and looked at it in confusion. She didn't know why the toilet lid was covered, but after a glance, she went straight into the bathroom. She took off her clothes and stood under the shower. When she was taking a shower, she suddenly remembered that Xiao Su said she guessed wrong. So it was Li Nanheng who carried her off the plane? Was she so drunk at that time? He came to High City with her, but in the end, he had to carry her when she was drunk. He must have been very impatient. As Feng Ling thought about it, she scratched her forehead in annoyance, feeling a little annoyed. She would never drink so much in the future. Just now, Xiao Su said that Boss told him something before he left. Before he left, he meant that Li Nanheng left. Chapter 1080. Through Xiao Su and Shun Mu's introduction, Feng Ling was successfully introduced to Mrs. Mo's side. Unlike the young and ignorant children in Mr. Ted's family, Jinwan did not trust Mrs. Mo so easily. However, after interacting with her for a short period of time, Jinwan had gradually grown accustomed to and trusted Feng Ling's character. What kind of woman was Jinwan? Feng Ling did not know how to describe it. She could only say that everything Jinwan had, Feng Ling did not, and everything Feng Ling had, Jinwan did not. Their tempers complemented each other miraculously. Feng Ling did not speak much, but she was very responsible as Mrs. Mo's bodyguard. Jinwan would often tug on Feng Ling's emotions to chat with her. Most of the time, Jinwan was the only one talking. Even if Feng Ling did not speak, she would quietly listen and watch from the side. In Jinwan and Mr. Mo's marriage and relationship, Feng Ling saw many things that she had never imagined. For example, it turned out that a man and a woman could really have such strong feelings for each other. For example, feelings could not be ended after a conversation. Many people were unswervingly faithful in their marriages and relationships. They did not just fall in love once, but for a lifetime. Mr. Mo's feelings for Jinwan, even if he never said it out loud, Feng Ling could tell from their relationship that they were going to be together forever and ever. In addition to staying by Jinwan's side every day and guarding outside her studio, Feng Ling would occasionally take an hour or two to go to the MO Corporation to meet the brothers from 11 Base who had been sent here. However, she had never seen these brothers in 11 Base before and didn't know which team they were from. Judging from their martial arts skills, they were indeed very good. Otherwise, they wouldn't have been sent to work for Mr. Mo half a month after Feng Ling arrived in High City. She went to Mo Corporation again. The moment she entered, she saw a man with a crew cut waving at her. "Come here." After settling her down, Xiao Su returned to the United States. Recently, Feng Ling didn't have any acquaintances around her. She saw that the other party was wearing a black suit, but there was a small 11 logo on his chest. After confirming that he was from 11 Base, Feng Ling approached him. The man saw her approach and grinned at her. "What's wrong? Don't you remember me?" Feng Ling glanced at him in confusion. "Remember what? We've met?" "TSK, little junior sister Feng Ling, your memory is really bad. Back then, when you entered 11 Base at the age of 13, I was still in Team 1. At that time, Old Han often called you to Team 1 to secretly learn from them. I passed you mineral water many times, but you actually don't remember?" Feng Ling stood there in a daze for a long while before she remembered. "If that's the case, I do have some impression of you. But when I entered Team 1, it seemed that you were already... I've been following Mr. Mo since a long time ago. We were all together with Mr. Mo, but we never expected that a skinny little fellow like you would really be a woman. Last time, when our people brought you back from the airport, I took a glance at you. When I confirmed that you were indeed Feng Ling, I was surprised for quite a while. However, after hearing Brother Su's brief explanation of your situation, I felt sorry for you. You didn't have anyone to rely on when you were young. You wanted to find a place to settle down, so you pretended to be a man. It wasn't easy for you." Feng Ling was very pleased that others understood her, but she was not used to talking about her sufferings and her past, so she didn't say anything. But this was also good. In the future, she would at least have some friends here. It was not bad for him to call her little junior sister. After all, they were both from Team 1, and the drill master was also Han Jin. It was not strange for him to call her little junior sister. Before she could think of anything else, she suddenly felt a weight on her shoulder. The other party had already placed a hand on her shoulder. As if they were good brothers, he announced to the brothers behind him, "From now on, this is everyone's little junior sister. Don't be fooled by her thin figure. In fact, she is very skilled. Let me tell you, don't offend her." Among this group of people were not only the people from 11 Base, but also several bodyguards from MO Corporation. Anyway, they were all capable people. Feng Ling was a little embarrassed by this introduction and didn't speak much throughout the whole process. However, as soon as this man finished speaking, more than a dozen strong men rushed forward and surrounded Feng Ling. They excitedly extended their hands to introduce themselves. "My name is Xiao Hans Han. My name is Hao Bing. My name is Zhou Yang. The man who put his arm around her shoulder and called her little junior sister was called by Kai. Others called him by Kai Shui. These strong men were all more than 8 meters tall. They pressed down on her from all directions. For the first time, Feng Ling felt a little suffocated standing among this group of people with her height of 7 meters. Bai Kai chuckled. Little junior sister Feng Ling, don't be so reserved. Before Xiao Su left, he specially said that if you lose a single hair or suffer a little grievance in High City, Boss Lee can come over and destroy our entire team. These words may not seem to carry much weight, but when you think about it carefully, it is really scary. Boss Lee has already mentioned it. If anyone dares to touch you, they will simply be going against the entire 11 base, and our Mr. Imo, don't worry. We will definitely dote on you and not let anyone bully you. Hearing this, the few strong men surrounded her even more tightly, almost blocking the group of people from the MO Corporation from taking another look at her, as if they didn't want to let other passers-by from the MO Corporation look at her. What a joke. Their 11 base and the MO Corporation's bodyguard team only had these few people, and they were all men. It was rare for a woman to sneak in, and she was so beautiful. They definitely couldn't let others take this piece of meat away. Regardless of Boss Lee and Xiao Su's warning, this little junior sister belonged to them. No one else should even think about taking a second look at her. Feng Ling had been in High City for half a month. Previously, she had been staying by Jin Wan's side. She didn't expect that she would encounter such an enthusiastic situation when she just came to the MO Corporation to take a look. Mr. MO was still in a meeting, and she had nothing to do. She could only deal with these people and then kept hearing their words in her ears. In fact, what Feng Ling really wanted to say was that in this world, the person who could easily bully her should not have been born yet. Even when she was in various dangerous places where the terrorists were, it was at most a little dangerous. It was not so easy to bully her. Please remember this book's domain name, 4M. Chapter 1081. The MO Corporation looked tall, cold, and solemn, but the security room on the first floor was particularly lively. Many passers-by came in to watch and asked what was going on. Several big men simply shielded Feng Ling behind them. Who dared to take a second look at the person Mr. Lee had told them not to bully? We haven't seen any women in our base before. Now the only junior sister has been assigned to High City. I don't know if we can increase our luck in love affairs if we suddenly have a woman by our side. It doesn't feel good to be single for so many years. That's right. Junior sister, you've been by Mrs. Mo's side every day. Have you met any suitable little sisters to introduce to us? Feng Ling, while they were laughing, someone outside suddenly gave them a look. The few strong men looked outside and immediately restrained their smiles. All of them instantly became serious. Feng Ling paused and turned to see M.O. Jingshan's figure. It seemed that he had just passed by. Hearing the laughter inside, he turned his head and glanced in this direction. It wasn't that she hadn't been in contact with Mr. M.O. these days, but it was the first time that she had such a face-to-face contact in the company. Usually, Mr. M.O. was definitely a wife-doting maniac, but in the company, he was obviously an incorruptible and cold-blooded boss. However, no matter where Mr. M.O. was, he was still a handsome man. In Feng Ling's eyes, Mr. M.O. was a man who wouldn't show anything, but had his own control. No one could detect anything from him in the blink of an eye, but in his hands, many things had already been turned upside down in the blink of an eye, and no one could resist him. However, such a man who looked as gentle as jade, but was actually very dangerous, really doted on his wife to an amazing extent. In the short half a month she had been in High City, whenever she met Dr. Chin, he would teasingly ask her, "Have you been fed too much dog food by the M.O. couple?" Indeed, Feng Ling, who was as calm as water, felt quite full. Hearing Dr. Chin's complaints, it seemed that he had suffered a lot of dog food. M.O. Jingshan glanced at Feng Ling and turned to speak to Shenmu. Shenmu nodded respectfully and quickly walked out of the company's main entrance. They couldn't see what Special Assistant Shen was doing from here, but Mr. Mo didn't seem to be in a hurry to go out. Feng Ling, M.O. Jingshan's voice rang out. "Why aren't you at Jinlin Building?" Suddenly being called, Feng Ling walked out. Mr. Mo, Mrs. M.O. just had a meeting in the studio. I saw that she was taking a nap in the break room, so I came here for a walk. When I came here half a month ago, I still had a lot of things to hand over and needed to report here. Afternoon nap. M.O. Jingshin's clear brows were calm and peaceful. The studio is peaceful today. No one went to cause trouble. No, the previous incident with CEO Jean has already been resolved. They don't have the guts to cause trouble again. Mrs. M.O. is very clever. She is also very careful in choosing her investors and clients. Aside from the external dangers that you told me about, there won't be any trouble at her place. I'll be watching over her. Mr. M.O., don't worry. M.O. Jingshin looked at her and mildly curved his lips. Just when Feng Ling thought that the questioning was over and he was about to leave, the man's low and mild voice suddenly landed in her ears. Next week is Nanheng's birthday. It's been so many years since we can gather together in High City. Let's find a place to drink a few books. Come with Jean Wan. When Feng Ling heard the two words, Nanheng, her expression did not change. She was silent for 2 seconds before saying calmly, I'll send Mrs. Amo over safely. She said to send Jean Wan over, not to accompany her in. Mo Jingshan looked at her again. He did not say much, nor did he say anything. He just smiled and left. After Mo Jingshan left, Feng Ling raised her eyes to look at the man's tall and straight back. Her heart churned with displeasure. How on earth did Li Nanheng manage to make everyone around her seem to know that there was a connection between them? This group of people didn't dare to touch her and seemed to be really caring for her. But she didn't need such care, and it was clear that even if she didn't say anything, the words Li Nanheng's property were engraved on her head. She had already hidden in High City. Did this man still have a way to control everything about her? America, Los Angeles. Many years ago, in that orphanage, the principal, several aunties, and teachers all wore expressions of shock and bewilderment. 11 Base had not come to their orphanage for a long time. Nowadays, 11 Base was no longer a place where just anyone could sneak into. There was no longer the rule of selecting members from various orphanages every few years like in the past. It was rare that Mr. Lee suddenly came in person, but he actually asked them for the blood sample of the child named Feng Ling. Because the identity of orphans was relatively special, no matter who they were, as long as they had been adopted in the orphanage, a tube or two of their blood would be drawn and kept for convenience in finding their parents or for other purposes. However, it was not easy to find Feng Ling's blood sample. Although they did draw her blood back then, she was a very unique existence in the orphanage. In addition, she was already 12 years old when she entered the orphanage. She was not the kind of child who was easy to discipline. In fact, the orphanage had been considering whether to keep her or not, so her blood sample was not placed together with the other children's, but separately placed outside. Later, the previous principal changed, and it was not easy to investigate what happened back then. They also did not know where Feng Ling's blood sample was. However, after so many years, Mr. Lee came in person and asked for Feng Ling's blood sample. How could they find it? However, it was clear that Mr. Lee would not easily let go of the orphanage. He was determined to get to the bottom of what had happened to Feng Ling in the orphanage. Although the principal was no longer around, some of the aunties and teachers who had come into contact with Feng Ling were still here. After a careful investigation, he finally found out what kind of life Feng Ling had led in the orphanage for a year. A 12-year-old child was injected with a tranquilizer every day and locked in a small dark room. With every minute that he heard, Li Nanheng's eyes turned colder. Please remember this book's domain name, 4M. Chapter 1082. After 2 or 3 days, this group of people finally found some worn-out bottles with blood samples in the abandoned warehouse of the orphanage. After comparing them one by one, they finally confirmed Feng Ling's blood. After receiving the blood sample belonging to Feng Ling, Li Nanheng saw the word Feng Ling written under the white sticker that had turned yellow and peeling. The old color piled up in a certain place was very obvious. Even though it was too old, it could still be used to check DNA. If he really wanted to check Feng Ling's DNA, he could just pluck a strand of her hair. At this moment, Li Nanheng stood here and took away everything that Feng Ling had left here one by one. Looking at the pitiful amount of things, he didn't know what he was thinking. But there was a piece missing, and the pain was excruciating. If he had discovered her earlier and taken her away, instead of letting her disguise herself as a man and live cautiously every day, perhaps she wouldn't have become so stubborn and cautious. Perhaps if he had let her feel the warmth between people earlier, her heart wouldn't have been so cold and hard, so cold that it was hard for him to melt. Li Nanheng walked out with the blood sample that Feng Ling had left behind. When he passed by the abandoned small building that he had once walked by, his eyes suddenly turned in the direction of the door. Back then, it was through this door. She was inside. He was outside. The director of the orphanage and a group of people stood behind. Seeing Mr. Li stand by the abandoned small building for a long time and finally leave with an unclear expression, the group of people trembled with fear, but they didn't dare to say a word. Jean Lin Building. Jean Wan had just gone to a meeting. When she came out, she saw that Feng Ling was still standing outside. Feng Ling, usually when I'm working or in a meeting, even if you don't go in, you should find a place to sit down and rest. Don't always stand outside like this. Aren't your legs tired? Feng Ling said calmly, "It's fine. I'm used to it." Jean Wan had clearly long adapted to Feng Ling's indifferent personality. Seeing her indifferent expression, Jean Wan smiled. At this moment, Xiaoba had just made 2 cups of milk tea. She handed one to Jean Wan and one to Feng Ling, saying with a worshipping expression, "Feng Ling, drink milk tea." Feng Ling glanced at Xiaoba and then at the cup of milk tea. "Thank you, but I won't drink it." Little Eight puffed up her cheeks. "I specially made it for you." Seeing Xiaoba's stubborn expression, Feng Ling hesitated for a moment before taking it. She simply thanked him. "Thank you." Xiaoba then turned to tell Jean Wan about her work, looking back at Feng Ling from time to time. Seeing that Feng Ling didn't drink the milk tea, she turned her head and said, "It's really delicious. Give me some face and try it." Feng Ling, she didn't usually drink this stuff. Seeing Little Eight's expression, she had no choice but to take a sip. It was very sweet and tasted a little like cocoa. She pursed her lips again and said, delicious." Xiaoba immediately chuckled. When Xiaoba turned to do other things, Jean Wan saw that Feng Ling was still holding the cup of milk tea in her hand. She smiled and reached out to take it and then put it on the windowsill. "All right, if you don't want to drink it, you don't have to force yourself. You don't know. Ever since someone came to the studio to make trouble and was dealt with by you with just a few punches and kicks, Xiaoba's admiration for you is like a surging river. You are now her idol, so it's inevitable that she will think of you no matter what she does." Feng Ling looked at Jean Wan and didn't say much about Xiaoba's matter. She just said, "By the way, Mrs. Imo, Mr. Imo told you to go back early recently. Even if there are people protecting you at night, don't walk around. He told you to go back to the Yew Garden early." "Got it." Jean Wan smiled and looked at the time. "I heard that it's Nanheng's birthday in a few days. Since you came from 11 base, you should be very familiar with Nanheng, right? Let's go together then." Feng Ling remained calm. For the time being, Jean Wan didn't know what happened between Feng Ling and Nanheng. In fact, she didn't know much about Nanheng. She just got along well with Feng Ling and really liked Feng Ling. In fact, Jean Wan would often hear Xiaoba secretly muttering that Feng Ling was really very good. It would be better if Feng Ling could be more approachable and not always put on a stern face to make people not dare to approach her. Feng Ling really didn't know how to get along with others. Although Jean Wan was really good, and Xiaoba was also very cute, and she tried her best to be easygoing, she usually couldn't find any funny points when they chatted. So Xiaoba often joked that she was a modern cold-faced heroine and something like that, a cold and powerful goddess. They were all famous terms that Feng Ling had never heard of before, but it was really easy to get along with them. Her job as a bodyguard in High City was not as dangerous as when she was in Mr. and Mrs. Ted's home. At that time, she was in Mr. and Mrs. Ted's home to prevent those terrorists from secretly attacking and opponents from taking revenge. At the same time, she was also protecting a young girl. Jean Wan was different. Jean Wan was very sensible when doing things. It was just that Mo Jingshan's background was too powerful, and many things would be slightly more complicated. In order to prevent Jean Wan from encountering any potential dangers, Mo Jingshin asked someone to accompany her by her side. Usually, when they encountered small problems, they didn't even need to take out a weapon. Just a few simple punches and kicks were enough to make those small characters suffer. 2 days later, Xiaoba suddenly stopped Feng Ling before getting off work, holding a small notebook in her hand. Looking at Xiaoba, who looked cute but was actually older than her by 2 years, Feng Ling raised her brows. "What's the matter?" Xiaoba grinned, revealing her 2 little canine teeth. "Aren't the 3 big bosses going to gather soon? Mr. Mo and Dr. Qin are the 2 legends of High City. Boss Nanheng is also the boss of the legendary 11 base under the United Nations, which is even more powerful than the military. As for CEO G's side, I think if I raise this request, she will definitely slap me to death. Feng Ling, you see, when I make CEO G coffee and milk tea every day, I will specially bring some for you. Seeing how well I treat you, can you help me get an autograph from these bosses?" Feng Ling looked at Xiao Ba's infatuated expression and expressionlessly pushed her head away. "You're afraid that Mrs. Mo will slap you to death, but aren't you afraid that I'll slap you to death? You won't be so heartless." Perhaps because Feng Ling always gave off a neutral feeling that made people feel reliant, Xiao Ba couldn't help but act spoiled. Feng Ling's expression did not change. "No, I'm even more heartless. It's been a long time since I asked for monthly votes. It's the end of the month. I'm asking for monthly votes. Also, dear friends, remember to make time every day to help Qing Qing fight for the Chinese romance finals. Hee. Please remember this book's domain name. 4M." Chapter 1083. Xiao Ba immediately cried. "If you really can't do it, I just want an autograph. You are so familiar with Boss Nanheng. Is his autograph okay?" Thinking of how it took her several days to get his autograph, Feng Ling's expression darkened. "No." Xiao Ba gently tugged at her sleeves. "Good, Feng Ling." Feng Ling looked at her fangirl expression speechlessly and raised her hand to avoid her. "Impossible." Seeing that Feng Ling was really determined and showed no signs of compromise, Xiao Ba sighed. "You see, I'm by Mrs. Mo's side every day, but I haven't even seen Mr. Mo's face. Even if I saw him once, it was just a hurried glance. It's like you finally met a god, but because of your poor eyesight, you can't even see what the god looks like. It's such a pity. I just want an autograph. After staying by Mrs. Mo's side for a long time, you'll see what you should see with your own eyes. Mr. Mo just rarely comes to the studio here. Mrs. Mo is too busy now, and there are few opportunities for her to take you to the Mo Corporation. If you really want to see him, I'll take you with me when I go to the Mo Corporation." Xiaoba looked at her in surprise for a while and suddenly hugged her arm excitedly. "Aya, you're not so cold-hearted. Look, you can even say that you want to take me to the Mo Corporation. It means that in fact, Feng Ling, you have already regarded me as a friend, right?" Feng Ling silently watched the girl who suddenly leaned over to hug her arm. She resisted for a long time and did not push her away. She might really have to change her bad habit of not liking being touched by others. "I don't have to see him. Anyway, these people are all gods in my eyes. It's enough to have an autograph. Besides, he's CEO G's husband. I can smell the immortal aura from CEO G every day," Xiaoba said softly. "But Dr. Qin and Boss Nanheng are different. I can't even come into contact with them usually." Feng Ling pursed her lips and said lightly, "I don't come into contact with them either." Xiaoba didn't know much about 11 Base, but seeing that Feng Ling had never mentioned anything about Nanheng, she believed her and looked at her. "Don't tell me you didn't even see Boss Nanheng when you were in 11 Base?" Feng Ling remained calm. "He is the boss of the base. I'm just a member being trained. How can I have the opportunity to see him?" "All right." Xiaoba really believed her. On the plane from Los Angeles to High City, Li Nanheng was holding a stack of DNA investigation materials that only he had seen from beginning to end. The man's fingers slowly clicked on the black leather wallet that contained the information in his hand, and there was an unfathomable and meaningful smile on his lips. If he had known that everything was already predestined, he would have married his little wife a long time ago. She was unwilling to return to the Feng family and face her own background. Sure, but she had to face the fact that she was destined to be his woman in every aspect. Li Nanheng's lips were stained with a faint smile that even he himself did not notice. He looked back at the vast clear sky outside the window. Little wife, after running around for so long, it's time to pull in the net. Feng Ling sneezed. Jin Wan, who was sitting in the car, turned to look at Feng Ling, who was driving. You caught a cold? No. Feng Ling continued driving and glanced at the time. Zijing Qing Clubhouse is still a few kilometers away from here. We're almost there, but we're already a little late today. Mr. Mo should have already told him. It's all right. I can't avoid work. They'll understand if I go after I'm done with my work. Besides, it's Nanheng's birthday. I'm not as close as those brothers. If I really go, I'll probably just eat and drink the whole time. Jinwan glanced at the time as she spoke. Come in with me in a while. Feng Ling did not answer. After the car arrived at Zijing Chung Clubhouse, Jinwan walked in front, and Feng Ling followed behind. As they walked, she paid attention to the crowd around to check if there were any suspicious people. She sent Jinwan to the door of the private room, but Feng Ling stood outside the door and did not enter. Jinwan looked back at her. Let's go in together? No, I'm not used to this kind of scene. Mrs. Mo, you go in by yourself. Feng Ling took a step back, her expression calm. Although Jinwan did not understand the matter between her and Nanheng, she could roughly see that Feng Ling seemed to be a little uncomfortable. She glanced at her a few more times before nodding. All right, I'll go in first. When Jinwan entered, she suddenly felt that Nanheng seemed to be in a good mood today. It was rare for him to be a little more talkative. She had seen him a few times in the past, but it seemed that this person was especially cold and difficult to approach, and she could not speak much to him. When Jinwan walked in, Nanheng turned his eyes to the door and saw Feng Ling, who was dutifully standing outside with several other bodyguards. What are you standing outside for? Come in. Nanheng lowered his voice and sounded like an order. Jinwan also turned back to look at Feng Ling. Yes, come in. It's not like you're an outsider. Feng Ling still stood outside the door and did not speak. Her gaze swept past Nanheng's face, but it was just a very indifferent glance. She did not have any intention of greeting him and shifted her gaze back to Jinwan. This kind of occasion is not suitable for me, Mrs. Mo. I'll wait outside. Call me if there's anything. With that, she directly closed the door from outside. Afterward, Qin Siding sat by the side and watched as the Mo couple frantically displayed their affection. Li Nanheng's expression was dark as he watched the couple displaying their affection. It was as though he wanted to cut the two of them into pieces. Chapter 1084. Li Nanheng glanced at her without batting an eyelid. He looked at her with a pair of eyes that were half awake and half drunk. His eyes were so deep and dark that Feng Ling turned her head away and did not look at him again. The man looked at her and said, I don't know. I can probably walk. As he spoke, he took a step back from the wall. She didn't know if it was intentional or not, or if he really couldn't stand properly, but he suddenly staggered 2 steps to her side. Suddenly, almost half of his body weight fell on her. Feng Ling was caught off guard by his sudden fall. She quickly raised her hand to support him, but she was still forced to take 2 steps back. She was almost pressed against the wall by him. Fortunately, she reacted quickly. Feng Ling frowned because of the smell of alcohol on the man's body. She supported his chest with both hands and then raised her hand to support his arm. She turned to look at Li Nanheng, who seemed to be unable to support his body, and lowered his head. Against the light, she couldn't see his expression, but the smell of alcohol on his body was indeed strong. The man didn't speak again, but leaned most of his body weight on her. Feng Ling wanted to say something, but seeing that he smelled of alcohol, she felt that there was no need to say anything. She turned to see that Mr. Mo's men had left, leaving only the 2 of them, so she could only help him out. When they reached the door, the wind outside blew. Obviously, Li Nanheng was drunk. He looked for the car key on his body and staggered toward the parking lot. Although he was drunk, it was a little difficult for her to suddenly hold him back with his strength. Feng Ling rushed to hold his arm. Don't go over. How can you drive like this? I'll send you back. Li Nanheng acted as if he didn't hear her. He raised his hand to wave her hand away and was about to walk to his car. Feng Ling looked back and saw that Jin Wan's car had also been driven away by the bodyguards. She felt a little strange. If Mrs. Imon knew that she was still here, she definitely wouldn't be so ruthless and drive away the car. After all, she could take Mr. Mo's car back. But now everyone was gone, and only Li Nanheng's car was left. Feng Ling glanced at the parking lot. Although she was puzzled, she still raised her hand to grab the car key from Li Nanheng's hand, and then helped him to walk toward the Jeep. As they walked, she said, "Where do you live now? I'll drive your car back." The man who fell on her did not speak, but his head leaned toward her. Feng Ling frowned and raised her hand to push his head aside. However, she was pushed so hard that the man staggered forward and almost fell in the car. Feng Ling hurriedly reached out to hold him. As soon as she did, the man subconsciously grabbed her arm and abruptly pulled her in front of him. Because of the sudden strength of his hand, Feng Ling fell forward. As she fell against the car door, her back was suddenly pressed tightly by the man. He was behind her, firmly imprisoning her between his chest and the car door. Feng Ling's face was pressed against the cold car window. Her mind was particularly clear. She was about to kick him back when the man seemed to inadvertently block her leg with one leg. At the same time, he pressed her down and rested his chin on her shoulder. He abruptly hugged her from behind with a drunken look. Li Nanheng. Only then did Feng Ling realize that something was wrong. Her expression turned ugly, but being imprisoned by the man behind her, she couldn't turn back. She could only say coldly, "Are you pretending to be drunk?" The man behind her did not speak. He pressed down on her and held her tightly in his arms. Feng Ling suspected that this man had planned for her to send him off from the beginning. Otherwise, with his alcohol tolerance, how could he have gotten drunk after drinking for such a short while? Feng Ling wondered if this man had intended for her to send him off. "Let go of me." Feng Ling was furious. "Let go." The man moved, but he seemed to inadvertently rub his slightly stubbled chin against the skin on the back of her neck, causing goosebumps to rise all over Feng Ling's body. She couldn't bear it any longer and wanted to bend her arm to hit his abdomen to push him away. However, the man was still able to resolve all of her next moves. When she bent her arm, he seemed to inadvertently hold her arm, not allowing her to exert any strength. When she moved her leg, his leg firmly pressed against hers, not giving her any chance to struggle. Li Nanheng. Feng Ling was really angry. She pressed her face against the car window and said coldly, "Don't mess around in public. Let go of me." The man lowered his head to the back of her neck and said hoarsely with a hint of drunkenness, "How am I messing around? Do you mean that if this isn't a public place, I can mess around with you?" Feng Ling furrowed her brows. She exerted some strength behind her, but was still held by him. She angrily twisted her body between his arms and the car door. Her fingers that were held firmly in the man's palm also dug hard into his palm. Suddenly, she saw a car driving by. The headlights of the car were slightly dazzling. She instinctively turned her head away. Li Nanheng seemed to know that her eyes were dazzled by the light. In order to let her turn her head away smoothly, he slightly relaxed his strength. She immediately took advantage of his relaxation and suddenly pulled her hand out. She turned around abruptly and looked directly at the man in front of her. She raised her leg and was about to kick him when she suddenly saw the dark light in the man's slightly drunken eyes. He lowered his eyes to look at her. His eyes were very dark, but in the darkness, there seemed to be light. She suddenly choked back the curse that was about to come out of her mouth. She only looked at him coldly. However, the man in front of her only lowered his head to look at her. As though he felt more comfortable because she turned around, he pressed her against the car door. He lowered his eyes to stare at her, and then at her lips that were pursed into a line due to anger. His eyes darkened even more, and he slowly lowered his head to her lips. Feng Ling's heart skipped a beat. Just as he was about to kiss her recklessly, she abruptly turned her head away to avoid him. The man did not change because of her movements. However, when Feng Ling thought that he might kiss her face, the man suddenly tilted his head and fell forward on her. His head rested on the other side of her shoulder, and almost all the weight of his body was about to directly press her down. Feng Ling subconsciously rushed to support him and then abruptly pushed him forward by an arm's length. She watched as the man swayed as though he was half drunk and half awake, but also seemed to be so drunk that he couldn't stand steadily. Her teeth were itching with hatred. Chapter 1085. She remembered how she had been ignored by him in the base for so many days in order to get his signature. She remembered how she had spent more than 10 hours on the plane to avoid the awkwardness of being with him. She remembered how she hadn't seen him in the past few days in the sea. Today, he had used his birthday as an excuse to appear, but he was so drunk that he even wanted her to send him home. Feng Ling lifted her foot and kicked his calf hard to vent her anger. The man frowned innocently because of her kick. He staggered forward unsteadily and pounced on her again, pressing her firmly against the car door. His tall body bowed, and he rested his head on her shoulder, not moving. Feng Ling. Although Li Nanheng was shameless, he shouldn't be this shameless. He should be really drunk. She pushed him a few more times. Seeing that he seemed to be dead drunk, Feng Ling supported him with a dark expression and took 2 steps back. She pressed the electronic car key in her hand, opened the car door at the back, and stuffed him in. The woman's movements were not gentle at all. In fact, it was frighteningly rough. Li Nanheng staggered when he was pushed in. No matter how big the car was, the man was tall. When she pushed him in, his head hit the other side of the car door. Feng Ling ignored him completely. After shoving his long legs in, she slammed the car door. After closing the car door, Feng Ling stood outside the door and looked at the black Jeep in front of her. This was the car that Li Nanheng liked. He didn't stay in High City for long and specially bought a car. Did he plan to come to High City often? Previously, she seemed to have heard someone say that recently, because of the underground arms business between him and Mr. Mo, he often flew over. She didn't know if it was because of this. But what was she avoiding by coming to High City, a place she was not familiar with? Feng Ling stood alone outside the car door for a while. After feeling the cold wind for a while, she felt some of her depression dissipate. She opened the car door and sat in the driver's seat. After sitting in, she looked back and saw that the man was still in the position she had shoved into the car. He had not moved. It seemed that he was really drunk. She retracted her gaze, fastened her seatbelt, and drove him to find a hotel. She didn't know where he was staying, so she could only find a hotel nearby for him to stay in. In any case, it was impossible for her to bring him to where she was staying now. She couldn't do something like inviting a wolf into her house. Even if this wolf seemed to have become a cold wolf in recent months, it was still a wolf. Feng Ling drove the car to a 5-star hotel closest to the Ionzi Jing Chung Clubhouse. She didn't have much of a concept of a 7-star hotel, but this hotel looked pretty good. She parked the car in the opposite parking lot and opened the back door. She looked at the man who was still lying there and reached out to help him up. It was at this moment that Feng Ling discovered that it was much more difficult to help a drunken man out of the car than to carry a 300-pound sandbag and run. She spent a lot of effort to help him up, but the man placed all his weight on her shoulders. When she finally managed to pull him out of the car, the man staggered and leaned against her, allowing her to support him. The smell of alcohol on his body was close to her nose, causing her to feel a little irritated. After locking the car, she supported him toward the main entrance of the hotel. She wasn't far from the hotel's main entrance. Walking 100 meters was more strenuous than walking a mile. She really couldn't tell if he was doing it on purpose or if people were like this when they were drunk. He looked like he couldn't wait to crush her to death. When she finally entered the hotel, the staff in the lobby saw her supporting a tall man and hurriedly stepped forward to help her. However, Li Nanheng glanced coldly at an angle that Feng Ling couldn't see. At the same time, he raised his hand to hold her waist and even bent his body to press his head tightly against her neck, looking cold and indifferent as though no one except for her was close to him. Feng Ling didn't see his expression. She only felt that this man seemed to untie her up with his arms. She lowered her head to glance at him strangely, but couldn't see his face or his expression. She only saw that for some reason, the staff who were about to come over to help suddenly retreated as though they didn't dare to come over. Feng Ling found it strange. Could it be that he had stayed in this hotel before, and these people recognized him and didn't dare to touch him? Feng Ling couldn't figure it out. This man was really too heavy. She helped him to the elevator and said, "Help me get a room first. After I help him in and let him lie down, I'll come down and give you his identity card." "All right, miss. Please wait a moment." Smelling the smell of alcohol on the tall and handsome man she was supporting, the staff at the front desk smiled at her understandingly and then asked the security guard to help her press the elevator button. At the same time, she reminded, "Please come down as soon as possible to apply for a new identity card. We see that it's too difficult for you to support him, so we made an exception this time. Under normal circumstances, it's not allowed to get a room without seeing the identity card." "Got it." Feng Ling didn't say much. After the elevator door opened, she quickly helped Li Nanheng in. The security guard followed in, holding a room card in his hand. After following them to the upper floor, the elevator door opened and the security guard walked out. Seeing this was the 6th floor, Feng Ling supported him while following the security guard. When the security guard opened the door of a room, he looked back and signaled that she could help him in first. She quickly dragged Li Nanheng, the big burden, in. The man was almost tightly pressed against her. The security guard watched from outside, but was too embarrassed to come over to help. So he retreated outside the door and waited for her to go out to apply for a new identity card. With great difficulty, she finally pressed Li Nanheng onto the bed. Feng Ling tripped over the man's leg and stumbled down onto him. Then she quickly lay up and looked at the man lying on the bed motionless. She secretly ground her teeth and fumbled around on his body for a while. Finally, she found where his wallet was. She was about to untie his coat to take his wallet when the man suddenly raised his hand and clasped her wrist. The man's body temperature was slightly higher because of the alcohol, and the temperature of his palm was slightly hot. Feng Ling paused and abruptly looked at the man lying on the bed. She was about to scold him for pretending to be drunk when the man did not open his eyes. He only breathed out the smell of alcohol and said hoarsely, "Don't touch me. If you touch me again, something will happen." Feng Ling, she pulled her hand out of his. She didn't even look at him to see if he was really drunk. She forcefully unbuttoned his shirt, took out his wallet, found his ID, and took out her own ID. She turned around and handed it to the security guard outside the door. She asked the security guard to help her hand it over to the front desk. "Ahaha, begging for monthly votes, begging for rankings, love you guys more and more." Chapter 1086. There are ID cards and money inside. Bring them to the front desk and let the staff take them, Feng Ling said as she stood in front of the door. The security guard took the wallet she handed over, checked the 2 IDs, and nodded. "All right, I'll send them over for you. If there's anything, you can call the front desk." "All right, thank you." Feng Ling closed the door and turned back, only to see that the man who had just fallen drunk on the bed had sat up. He unbuttoned his coat, took it off, and casually tossed it to the side. At this moment, he was tugging at the collar of his black shirt impatiently. 3 or 4 buttons on the collar were forcibly pulled open, revealing the man's collarbone, revealing an indescribable wildness and sexiness. Seeing his movements, Feng Ling walked over to pick up the coat he had thrown on the ground, folded it, and placed it on the sofa by the side. She turned to ask him if he was awake, only to see that the man only tugged his clothes a little and lay back down. Listening to the man's breathing, she found that it was slightly heavier than usual. It was probably because he had drunk too much and fell hot. Feng Ling walked over and touched his forehead. It was indeed a little hot, but thankfully it was not the kind of fever. She turned back into the bathroom, washed a towel, and wiped the man's head. As she wiped, she suddenly found that although she had known Li Nanheng for many years, she had never had such an opportunity to sit by the side and look at his face without any distractions. This man was indeed very good-looking. She had seen many good-looking men over the years. There were so many men in the base, and there were many good-looking and ugly ones, but there was no one as good-looking as Li Nanheng. Compared to Mo Jingxin's refined handsomeness and Dr. Qin's gentleness, Li Nanheng looked like the type of sunny and handsome little wolf dog when he was young. but now that he was 27 or 28 years old, he looked more robust than many good-looking men. The three men were all different, but compared to Mr. Mo and Dr. Chin, who looked gentle but were actually black-bellied, it was indeed more comfortable to get along with people like Li Nanheng. But she had also heard from others that Li Nanheng was also black-bellied. The only person he was honest with was her. His calmness was only directed at her. In the past, Feng Ling didn't think so. After coming to High City and meeting Mr. Mo, she finally understood what it meant to be able to manipulate clouds and rain with a flip of a hand without batting an eyelid, and what it meant to be truly two-faced. If it were Li Nanheng, he would have dragged her behind him and told her where there were clouds and where there were rain. When she was about to deal with it herself, he had already helped her settle everything. These three men had completely different personalities, but they miraculously became such close brothers, especially Li Nanheng's temper. When she was in the base in Los Angeles, she thought that everyone was afraid of him, but after coming here, she found that when these three ruthless characters sat together, there was no fear at all. They were completely stabbing each other with knives. But it seemed that only when he was with Dr. Chin and Mr. Mo, he was truly relaxed and defenseless. After wiping his face, Feng Ling sat on the bed and watched for a while. She recalled Li Nanheng's recent coldness and alienation toward her. Maintaining such a distance was indeed the way she had always wanted to interact with him. She was about to get up and send the towel back to the bathroom when her wrist suddenly tightened. Her body was suddenly pulled back and fell onto the bed. The man suddenly turned over and pressed her under his body. Feng Ling stared in astonishment at the man's deep eyes against the light on his back. She could not see if he was still drunk. Before she could speak, the man's drunken kiss abruptly landed. Feng Ling immediately turned her head to the side. Because she turned too much, the man's kiss fell on her ear, a particularly sensitive place. She immediately shivered and rushed to push him away as though she was stimulated. However, the man tied her hands behind her back, held her hands with one hand, and stroked the back of her head with the other. He turned her head around and pressed down again, forcing her to quickly shrink into the bed. Because the man was drunk, he didn't seem to have any self-control. When he pressed down, he didn't care about his own weight like before. Right now, he was pressing down on her so heavily and fiercely that she couldn't breathe. She wanted to struggle, but she was restrained by the man's hands and feet. Feng Ling cursed in her heart. When he bent down to kiss her again, she gritted her teeth and cursed. Isn't it good to be cold and indifferent all the time? Why do you have to pretend to be drunk to do such beastly acts? Do you think you could deceive me or deceive yourself? Li Nanheng's brows furrowed slightly, and his scorching breath brushed past her extremely sensitive ears. Little wife, let me kiss you, and Feng Ling, little wife. He thought she was his wife? So he was drunk, so drunk that he didn't even know who the person he was pressing on the bed was? Feng Ling thought that she was calm enough, but in an instant, the feeling of collapse in her heart made her entire head boil. She abruptly began to struggle hard. Let go of Li Nanheng. Although Li Nanheng could press her down, she was really angry right now. Her punches and kicks were not light at all. Li Nanheng was in pain from her kicks and directly pressed her hands on both sides of her body. He crossed his fingers and looked down at her angry face. Good wife, don't mess around. Just a kiss. Li Nanheng, you bastard. I thought you at least had some humanity. I didn't expect you to be so shameless. Feng Ling was so angry that her face turned pale. It was one thing for this man to be married, but now he actually mistook her for his wife? Did he usually have such a good relationship with his wife at home? Then what did he mean when he vowed to her in the past? However, after struggling for a long time, she could not break free. She angrily turned her head away and was about to bite his shoulder. However, when she tilted her head and was about to bite him, the man suddenly turned his head to meet her, accurately blocked her angry lips, and directly kissed her deeply. Because of his sudden, fierce kiss, Feng Ling almost couldn't breathe. She was so angry that her whole body was about to tremble, and she glared at the man on top of her. 4M. Chapter 1087. After being kissed by the man for a while, Feng Ling finally turned her head away and scolded, "You bastard!" Before she could say the word bastard, the man kissed her again. When she was about to suffocate from his suppression and plunder, she heard the man's low and husky voice against her lips. "Don't swear." Feng Ling's face had turned pale from anger. "You're so drunk, and you still have the nerve to care whether I swear or not. Even if I swear, I'm scolding you, the king." The man kissed her again, as if he was punishing her. In the end, Feng Ling fell back onto the bed weakly. She took a deep breath and pushed his chest with some difficulty, but she still couldn't push him away. Li Nanheng always had a clean and pleasant smell, but tonight, because of his birthday, he sat together with Mr. Mo and chatted for a long time and drank a lot of wine. No matter how expensive the wine was, when all kinds of wine were mixed together, it wouldn't smell good. Especially Feng Ling, who drank red wine until she was drunk last time, was allergic to the smell of wine and wanted to avoid it. He didn't give her any chance to avoid it. She pushed his chest. "Sober up first. Get up." She felt uncomfortable being stared at by the man, as if he was staring at a prey in his cage. She pushed him for a long time, but he still pressed her tightly and didn't move at all. "Li Nanheng, even if you're in heat, you have to look at the other party clearly. Get up first. I'm not your wife." "Ew." Feng Ling's words were stopped by the man's unreasonable kiss again. Feng Ling looked at this shameless man in disbelief, but he didn't give her any chance to dodge. He sucked on her lips heavily. When she opened her mouth to bite him, he brushed his tongue between her tongue and sucked on it, causing her entire body to go numb. If she wasn't angry, if she had sensed it carefully, she might have been able to feel that the man's fierce and domineering kiss had a hint of accommodation for her. No matter how she wanted to bite him, he only kissed her patiently. Bit by bit, he went straight in, sucking her lips and tongue until they were burning hot and numb. Feng Ling forcefully pulled out a hand to hit his shoulder. The man once again raised his hand to pull her hand down, pressing it against her side. The man's unique scent and the strong smell of alcohol rushed in her nose and between her lips and teeth, causing her brain to swell and her heart to ache. She didn't know what kind of pain it was, but when she thought of how Li Nanheng treated her like his wife and how this man behaved intimately in front of his wife, she felt as though she was about to explode. Is this the legendary jealousy? Feng Ling angrily tried to turn her face away. She almost arched her body on the bed, trying to avoid his lips. However, the man tightened his grip on her, not giving her the slightest chance to break free. It wasn't until he moved his lips to her ear that she got the chance to scold him. "Li Nanheng, if you dare to do that kind of thing to me again, I promise you won't see me again for the rest of your life." Li Nanheng didn't speak, but he suddenly quieted down. He leaned over her, pressed his lips against her ear, and didn't move again. "Do that kind of thing again?" Li Nanheng slowly shifted his gaze to the little woman under him. It was rare for him to not have a straight face, but a face full of anger. What did he do to her? What kind? The night was dark. Feng Ling didn't look at the man's eyes. She didn't know if he was awakened by her roar or something. She pushed him hard, and this time, the man was finally pushed away by her. He lay down by the side. Feng Ling instantly sat up and was about to get off the bed when the man suddenly turned over and pulled her into his arms. He forced her onto the bed again. This time, he didn't press her down but lay by her side, holding her in his arms. "Are you drunk or not? Don't be so shameless. I'm not your wife." In her life, Feng Ling had never felt as though her heart had been fried. She had all kinds of feelings. Sour, painful, everything. She didn't expect that this man's strange call of wife would suddenly cause her to lose control of her heart to such an extent. Li Nanheng didn't answer, but used his increasingly determined actions to tell her that she was his wife. He hugged her tighter and tighter, not giving her a chance to break free. Feng Ling's heart was still exploding. She closed her eyes. The light in the room was very bright, but when she closed her eyes, it still felt dazzling. She turned her head to avoid the light and the man's breath. Suddenly, she felt particularly powerless. She didn't return to 11 base, not because of the dignity she lost back then, but because of him. She insisted on not returning, not because she didn't like it, but because she couldn't do it. But she was in High City, and he was also in high city. She avoided him, but he approached step by step. They had clearly already given each other the cold shoulder. Now that she was stimulated to the point where she could completely feel the depression in her heart, the resistance and jealousy in her heart, did he really feel a sense of accomplishment? Must he let a person like her completely fall in love and die for a love? Only then would he be satisfied? But today she found out. It turned out that the reason she had been forcing herself to hold on. It turned out that she had been saying that she didn't care. But it couldn't compare to his affectionate words of wife. Feng Ling closed her eyes and didn't want to move anymore. Even if she moved, she couldn't break free. In the end, she simply didn't waste her strength and just lay there quietly, letting the man's arms hold her. She almost fell asleep in those inexplicable emotions. She seemed to feel that the man was watching her by the side, but she didn't want to open her eyes. Li Nanheng looked at the little woman beside him, who had finally learned to be jealous and angry, and fell into self-reproach because of her jealousy and anger. He firmly imprisoned her in his arms. No matter how dark the night was, it couldn't be darker than his eyes at this moment. He stared fixedly at the woman in his arms, who was finally beginning to be controlled by her emotions. Finally, she let herself fall asleep. The man raised his hand to touch her face. He felt the coldness of her cheeks and slowly sat up. Feng Ling must have really angered herself. When she fell asleep, her brows were still slightly furrowed. Li Nanheng picked her up and placed her back on the bed. He let her rest on the pillow and then covered her with the quilt. Looking at Feng Ling, who seemed to be in a bad dream, he gently stroked her soft hair. "Fool, you're jealous of yourself. Let's see how long you can stay calm." 4M. Chapter 1088. Qin's sighting called. It was probably because he had seen the two women at Zijing Cheng Clubhouse tonight that he, the usually calm Dr. Qin, had finally been triggered. It was rare for him to continue drinking. When Li Nanheng answered the phone, he glanced back at Feng Ling, who was sleeping on the bed. After making sure she was sleeping soundly under the warm quilt, he adjusted the air conditioner to a comfortable temperature and went out. Before Mo Jingshin rushed to Qin Sighting's villa, he called Li Nanheng. "Didn't you just drink tonight? Why are you drinking at Qin Sighting's place again?" Li Nanheng had already arrived. He sat on the sofa, glanced at the bright lights in the villa area outside the window, and then glanced at Qin Sighting, who was standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows with a gloomy and cold expression. "I was afraid he would take things too hard, so I came to take a look. But he has been standing in front of the window like a block of wood for half an hour. I suspect he has already entered a meditative state and can't hear anything." Speaking up to this point, Li Nanheng raised his hand and rubbed between his brows. If it weren't for Qin Sighting, he wouldn't have left Feng Ling alone in the hotel. Li Nanheng had no intention of meddling in the matter of calling Shi Nianj to Zijing Cheng Club, but Shi Nianj happened to choose to send a cake on his birthday, and Li Nanheng happened to be staying in High City for a long time, so he didn't have the time to interfere. However, he still couldn't bear to see Qin Sighting's lonely and indifferent appearance these past few years. When Mo Jingshin arrived, Qin Sighting was still standing in front of the floor-to-ceiling windows. "How long has he been standing there?" Mo Jingshin walked in. Li Nanheng turned to watch the tall man walk in. He flicked the cigarette ash with his well-defined fingers and raised his brows. "He's been standing there since he came back. He was like this when I came. Speaking of which," he glanced at Mo Jingshin. "You can still come so late. Could it be that Jean Wan was so drunk that she couldn't recognize you and kick you off the bed?" Mo Jingshin glanced at him. "You are very experienced. You often get kicked by women?" Li Nanheng raised his brows and smiled as he held the cigarette in his mouth. Didn't he often get kicked? In this life, the only woman who had ever kicked him was Feng Ling. As early as an hour ago in the hotel room, he had been kicked by her several times, and now his calf bone was still aching. The three men drank in the villa until dawn and ridiculed Qin Sighting. At the same time, Li Nanheng glanced at his cell phone. There was no call from Feng Ling. Even if she woke up, she wouldn't call him. Even if she woke up, she wouldn't call him. If he didn't really give her a hard time, he didn't know how long the little girl would be numb to it. It was rare for Cheen Siding to drink a lot tonight, because sure Nianj had left for so many years. However, she had recently returned to the country and appeared in front of him again. The lights in the villa opposite lit up again after a few years. Who would have thought that he had been defeated by love many years ago? He was a celebrity in the medical field who could control the life and death of people in front of the operating table. Mo Jingshin was not in a good mood tonight. It was said that Jin Wan said she was going to T-City to study, and his warm and soft wife wanted to go to another city to further her studies. Mo Jingshin had no reason to refuse. He had nowhere to vent his anger. Mo Jingshin was in a bad mood tonight. It was said that Jin Wan said she was going to study in T-City, and his wife wanted to go to another city to study. Mo Jingshin had no reason to refuse. But Li Nanheng was different. His little wife finally learned to be jealous. Boss Li was in a good mood. When Feng Ling woke up, it was already 6 o'clock in the morning. When she opened her eyes, she sat up abruptly. She didn't see Li Nanheng in the room, and the coat he had worn before was gone. He was gone. So last night, he hugged, nibbled, and kissed her. Sure enough, he regarded her as his wife. Whom did he regard as Feng Mingzhu? When he woke up, he found that the person in the room was her, so he didn't even say hello and left. Feng Ling got out of bed and walked around the room. There was no trace of Li Nanheng. She took a look at the sky outside the window. He must have been gone for a long time. So should she send him a text message now, wishing him and Feng Mingzhu a happy marriage and have a son soon? Maybe it was because she suddenly couldn't suppress her anger and this childish thought that she laughed. She stood in the room for a while and grinned inexplicably, but there was no warmth in her eyes. She gradually calmed down, went to the bathroom to wash up, and then left the room. Ignoring Li Nanheng's ID card, she took back her ID card and walked out without looking back. 2 hours later, Li Nanheng returned to the hotel. Seeing him come back, the staff at the front desk respectfully handed him his ID card, and at the same time said respectfully in a low voice, "Mr. Li, Miss Feng didn't say anything when she left, but she didn't look very good when she left." Li Nanheng responded lightly, glanced at his cell phone, and sent a text message to Feng Ling as he walked out. "I drank too much last night. Sorry." After sending the text message, Li Nanheng got into the car and sat in the car waiting slowly. 5 minutes later, Feng Ling, who rarely sent text messages and would never reply to his text message according to her usual temper, sent him a scram. Looking at the angry word and the exclamation mark, Feng Xiu felt a chill down his spine. Li Nanheng sat in the car and laughed. Little Feng Ling, who had always tried to be calm and cautious in everything. Today, she completely exploded. She was quite cute. Li Nanheng looked at the word with a smile and did not reply. He threw the cell phone on the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove away from the hotel. After exploding, Feng Ling began to deliberately avoid any place where Li Nanheng was. Knowing that he was in High City recently, Feng Ling didn't even go to the MO Corporation. She just stayed by Jin Wan's side every day as a door god. Whether it was Jin Wan's studio, the conference room, or other occasions, or the U Garden, except for her current temporary residence, Feng Ling had almost become Jin Wan's pendant. If it weren't for Mr. Mo, Feng Ling would not leave for a moment. Jin Wan also clearly found that Feng Ling's recent state was not very good, and couldn't help asking her, "You don't even want a little personal rest recently? You've been guarding me every day. Is it because someone very dangerous is going to appear recently? You make me feel a little scared." Feng Ling, "No, I just feel that since Mr. Mo asked me to guarantee your safety, I can't be too negligent." Jin Wan couldn't help laughing. "You've been so protective of me. Why do I always feel that you seem to be hiding from someone recently?" "No, you're wrong." Jin Wan raised her eyebrows. "Really?" "No." Chapter 1089. Mrs. Mo planned to go to a very famous university in T-City to further her studies. Mo Jingshin couldn't go to T-City to accompany her, so Feng Ling was naturally responsible for Mrs. Mo's safety throughout the journey. However, Mr. Mo arranged an apartment very close to T University for Jin Wan. He also arranged an apartment next to the apartment for Feng Ling but Feng Ling didn't live there. The reason was that when Feng Ling arrived in Tea City, she met Wen Liqing, who was in China. At first, Wen Liqing said that the medical school in the United States, where she had studied, sent her to China to be a guest professor at the famous medical school in Tea City for 3 months. Her relative happened to have an empty house here, so she came to live there. The house was not small, and it was boring to live alone. Seeing Feng Ling came, she asked her to live with her. Anyway, there were several bedrooms in the house. Even if Feng Ling didn't like to be disturbed when she slept, there would be no problem. The place where Wen Liqing lived was not far from Jin Wan's residence. It took about 20 minutes to walk and a few minutes to drive. It happened that Jin Wan didn't plan to live in an apartment after arriving in Tea City, but chose to live on campus. This place was closer to Tea University, and Feng Ling and Wen Liqing were good friends, so Feng Ling agreed to live there. In Tea City, Jin Wan stayed at school all day during the day and didn't even come out at night. Nominally, Feng Ling came to protect her, but she couldn't enter Tea University at will, so she spent most of her time with Wen Liqing. There will be a fraternity party at the medical school in the evening. I don't think I can come back tonight. If you're hungry, you can eat by yourself. Don't wait for me. Wen Liqing filled the refrigerator with food before leaving. Feng Ling didn't need to do anything at all. When it was time, she opened the refrigerator and saw all kinds of cold, hot, or ready-to-eat food in it. She didn't feel hungry at all. Wen Liqing was the kind of woman who looked very gentle, but was very careful and warm. Even if she left Feng Ling alone at home, she would arrange everything at home properly and wouldn't make Feng Ling feel uncomfortable at all. In the evening, someone knocked on the door. Feng Ling looked at the time and knew that it was definitely not Wen Liqing who knocked at the door at this time, so she ignored it. In the end, the person outside knocked on the door again after a while. However, the knocking sound seemed to be very patient. This floor wasn't high, and she had some self-defense items on her. Under the coffee table in the living room, there was a small electric baton that Wen Liqing had left for self-defense. After listening to the knocking for a while, Feng Ling picked up the electric baton under the coffee table and turned to open the door. The moment she opened the door, Feng Ling's gaze was cold and calm, but she suddenly saw a man standing outside the door. The coldness in her eyes froze. Dr. Wen was also surprised to see Feng Ling here. His cold eyes lingered on Feng Ling for 2 seconds, and he said indifferently, "Xiao Qing is not here. Miss Wen has a fraternity party at the medical school tonight. She went out with several seniors and won't come back until very late or tomorrow morning." "Dr. Wen, what are you doing?" Feng Ling looked at the man in front of her. It seemed that in her impression, the time she met Dr. Wen was in the infirmary of the base, or every time someone was injured, or in the hospital. Every time, he was in a white work uniform, which always looked elegant and cold. Now he was wearing a very casual light brown shirt, and his hair was clean and fluffy. Even if she didn't know he was a medical worker, she knew he was definitely an unapproachable flower. Dr. Wen was silent for a moment. "Are you staying here with her?" "Yes. She asked me to stay here temporarily." Dr. Wen nodded. "When she comes back, give me a call. If it's urgent, you can come in and wait." "No. If Li Nanheng finds out that I'm alone with you in a room, he will probably fly over and tear me apart." Dr. Wen's words sounded like a joke, but there was not much smile on his face. He just glanced at the living room behind her and turned to leave. Feng Ling looked at Dr. Wen's back and felt that he seemed to come in a hurry. It was said that Dr. Wen was very busy in several hospitals in the United States, and there were many medical symposiums in the United States on weekdays. Even Dr. Qin, who was too lazy to participate in anything on weekdays, was somewhat busy recently. Shouldn't Dr. Wen bear the brunt of it? Why was he here? Did he suddenly fly to China to see Miss Wen? Usually, Wen Liqing came back very early. She didn't know when she would come back for the so-called fraternity party. Feng Ling had never participated in a fraternity party, so she didn't know what kind of activity it was. At about 9 o'clock in the evening, Dr. Wen appeared again. Seeing that Wen Liqing hadn't come back yet, he asked Feng Ling where Wen Liqing was now. Feng Ling called Wen Liqing and asked her where the fraternity party was held. Wen Liqing seemed to have drunk some wine on the phone. There were many people around her, men and women, and the atmosphere was very lively. After telling Feng Ling the location, Dr. Wen asked her if she wanted to come over. Feng Ling looked at Dr. Wen's cold face and said that she would drive over to pick her up, and then hung up the phone. She is at the Lanting Guild Hall at number 19 Dongxiang Road. Shall I pick her up? Or Dr. Wen? When she said this, she saw his expression. Feng Ling knew that Dr. Wen had just flown over from the United States and probably didn't send a car here, so she handed her car key to him. Dr. Wen took the electronic car key from her and glanced at her again. What do you know? I don't know anything. I only know that Miss Wen is a very good woman. When I had an accident in 11 Base a few years ago, Miss Wen helped me. Otherwise, I would have died on the side of the road. Dr. Wen took a deep look at her, said no more, and left. Lanting Guild Hall. In a large private room, several young professors of medical schools and scholars with some reputation in the domestic medical community were sitting together. Even though they were very drunk, they just drank and chatted all the time because of their different careers and personalities. They didn't sing karaoke or play cards. Only a few people went to the next room to play cards, and the private room here was filled with the smell of alcohol. When Luching held a bottle of champagne in her hand and leaned her head on the shoulder of a young man next to her. Her cheeks were a little flushed, and she said with a pair of slightly drunk eyes, "Senior, you always said that I would give up sooner or later. I thought I could hold on for a long time since I was 16 years old, but this time it seems that I'm really going to give up. 4M." Chapter 1090. The young man on her shoulder sat on the sofa and didn't move. He just took away the bottle in her hand. Just give up. Don't drink. Wen Luching closed her eyes and leaned on his shoulder. Yes, I haven't drunk for many years. After drinking this time, have a good sleep and everything will be over. I'll send you back later. Let's talk about it after you wake up. Wen Luching shook her head, turned her face, raised her hand to wipe her slightly wet eyes, and then leaned her head on his shoulder. I agreed to the arrangement of the medical school this time, and will leave Los Angeles temporarily because I want to warn myself that I have to end things. It has been so many years, almost 10 years. I feel that I really can't stand it anymore. How can he be so ruthless? When I thought we were related by blood, he refused me, but later when I knew we were not related by blood, he still regarded me as his sister. Haha, who wants to be his sister? With that, she saw that the bottle in her hand disappeared, reached out to pick up a glass of wine on the table, turned her head and leaned on the shoulder of a senior sister who was a few years older than her on the other side. Senior sister, I feel sad. Have a few drinks with me. The woman who was called senior sister raised her hand and patted her on the head comfortingly. It's okay, it's okay. You can't find a three-legged toad, but there are two-legged men all over the world. Wen Linhan is not the only man in the world. Look, your senior brother has been waiting for you for so many years, but you just treat him as your boyfriend. If you really want to get over it, you can just accept your senior brother. Wen Luching chuckled, took a sip of wine, and then stood up with a bit hazy eyes. Seeing that no one was singing on the big screen, she staggered over, picked up the microphone, and said loudly as if announcing something, "Wen Linhan, I don't want you anymore." At this moment, the door of the private room was abruptly pushed open. A man walked in with a cold aura. His gaze unmistakably landed on the woman who usually wouldn't yell at anyone, but at this moment, she was holding a microphone and yelling. The originally noisy private room instantly fell into a strange silence because of the appearance of the man in front of the door. Wen Luching didn't even look at the man who suddenly appeared in front of the door. She just took a deep breath. She finally decided to let go of the obsessions and things that she couldn't let go of since she was 16. Everyone in the private room looked at Wen Luching, who was holding the microphone. Wen Luching had always been the darling of their group. When she was in school, she had a good personality, studied well, treated others well, had a high EQ, and was very smart. She never had any resentment towards life, and almost everyone who came into contact with her liked her. She used to be a good girl, and there were many men who chased after her, but she always held back and refused to fall in love. A few years later, everyone knew that she had put her brother in her heart from the age of 16. The affairs of the Wen family were a bit complicated, but it was a blessing. Wen Liqing had never been able to break the taboo. In the end, because her brother did not have a real blood relationship with her, she finally broke the taboo, but when Lin Han insisted that they only had a sibling relationship and never took a step forward. Wen Liqing's emotional struggle for nearly 10 years finally came to an end after when Lin Han planned to be engaged to a woman arranged by the Wen family. In the past, everyone advised her not to take Wen Lin Han too seriously, but probably her God gave her all the excellence, but he didn't give her an open-minded heart. In terms of love, she just stuck to Wen Lin Han and stubbornly refused to turn back. It was the first time in so many years that they heard her say that she was going to give up Wen Lin Han. However, Wen Lin Han, who had always been hiding from her, suddenly appeared in T-City. What was going on? Wen Liqing didn't see him, so she held the microphone and shouted again, "I don't want you anymore. I don't want you anymore. Wen Lin Han, even if you kneel down and beg me now, I don't want you anymore. Everyone, little princess, Dr. Wen is here. You don't have to shout so loudly. He can hear you." Wen Lin Han stood in front of the door, looking at the drunk woman who touched the microphone in her hand as if holding a treasure. His eyes were cold, and he didn't speak. He just closed the door, stood there, looked at her, and didn't move. No one in the private room dared to speak. Everyone knew that Dr. Wen was cold and indifferent. This person seemed to be indifferent. There was nothing that he particularly cared about, and there was nothing that he could persist in, but in fact, he was not a person to be trifled with. At that time, many people in the medical community of various countries warmly invited him to work in various world-famous hospitals. But Dr. Wen didn't like them at all. In the end, he chose to be a carefree base doctor in the infirmary of 11 Base. It could be seen that his temper was really not easy to control, and not everyone could shake the things he insisted on. So why did he suddenly appear in T-City at this time? It was simply like the sun rose from the west, okay? Wen Lin Han, let me tell you, it's not that no one wants me. I've kept myself chaste for you for so many years. I've been looking forward to it since I was a 16-year-old girl. I even kept my first kiss for you. Oh no, I lost my first kiss long ago. But that was an accident. Every time I kissed you, it was an accident. You pushed me away every time. I didn't even give you a proper kiss. Are you worthy of my feelings for you for so many years? Everyone was wondering if it was appropriate for them to stay here any longer. If they allowed her to continue talking, who knew what other explosive things would be revealed? Especially now that Dr. Wen was standing here, watching Wen Liqing act like a drunkard with a straight face. They really didn't want to miss this big show at all. You can marry whoever you want. It has nothing to do with me. I will never think of you or miss you again. From tomorrow on, I, Wen Liqing, will avoid you whenever I see you. If I stick to you again, I will be hit by a car when I go out. I will choke to death when I drink water or eat. Why don't you drink yourself to death now? The man's voice suddenly sounded. No one in this private room dared to make a sound just now. Only the music on Wen Liqing's screen and her own roar could be heard. Suddenly, Wen Lin Han's voice sounded, and everyone felt that their bones were about to be frozen. 4M. Chapter 1091. Wen Liqing's voice suddenly paused, and her hazy eyes suddenly turned to look at the person who couldn't possibly appear here. The moment their eyes met, her fingertips holding the microphone gradually became cold, and then she suddenly smiled. I really drank too much. I can even see illusions in people. Even though she said that, she was rooted to the spot and gripped the microphone tightly. All of a sudden, she couldn't say a word. Everyone looked at her who was shouting and swearing just now. But now, even if she thought it was just a fake illusion, she still couldn't do anything. When Lin Han walked over, the man was more than 8 meters tall. He looked down at the woman in front of him who was much shorter than him and said coldly, "Say what you just said again." Wen Liqing put the microphone to her mouth and stared at the man next to her. For some reason, she felt that this illusion seemed a little too real. Even when Lin Han's smell was so similar to hers. She stood there for a long time, holding the thing in her hand tightly and looking at him. The blurred image in front of her became clearer and clearer. When she looked at the coldness and when Lin Han's eyes, her eyes suddenly turned red. Brother, everyone, coward. You haven't made any progress after so many years. It's not an illusion. When Linhan's voice was indifferent. When Luqing suddenly smiled, but her eyes were red. It should be an illusion. Even if I take off my clothes and climb into his bed, when Linhan can still drive me out without any emotion. How could he come to T-City? Today is the day he is supposed to get engaged. When Linhan is going to get engaged tomorrow. It's impossible for him to come here. As she spoke, she turned to look at the group of friends who were sitting on the sofa. All of them had a tacit understanding and were just looking in her direction. She felt her hands and feet turn cold. She suddenly threw down the microphone in her hand, and the sound of the microphone falling to the ground was heard in the private room. It was a little deafening. She suddenly turned around and was about to run out. But as soon as she took half a step, she was suddenly pulled back by the arm that suddenly stretched out from her waist. At the moment she crashed into the man's arms, she lowered her head to avoid the man's breath and pushed his chest hard with her hands. If you want to get engaged, just get engaged. I'm fine. You don't need to come to T-City. Go away. When Linhan looked down at the woman struggling in his arms and didn't speak. He just turned to look at the senior student sitting on the sofa who had been with Luqing for many years. At the moment when the two men's eyes met, the people around seemed to feel that there were silent, cold arrows shooting at them. Dr. One, Xiaoqing's personality has never been like this. Now that you've provoked her to this extent, isn't it too late to bring her back to the United States because of your conscience? The senior sat there with a slight smile on his face, but the smile didn't reach his eyes. Take a person who is allergic to alcohol to such a place and let her drink like this. If I don't come now, do I have to wait for her to go into shock and stand in the emergency room and wait for her to be pushed in? When Linhan held the woman firmly in his arms and looked at him coldly. Haven't you seen her when she is allergic to alcohol? Or don't you know how many years she hasn't drunk alcohol? The man who was called the senior student frowned. When did Xiaoqing start to have this symptom? The senior sitting next to her suddenly patted her head with a look of realization on her face. Oh, I forgot. Xiaoqing didn't have any allergies when she was still in school. Later, when she was hospitalized with a fracture, the new nurse on duty used the wrong medicine and overdosed, leaving her with severe allergies to alcohol and several drugs. You guys weren't around at that time, so not many people knew about this. Xiaoqing didn't say anything about it, but she really hasn't had any alcohol in the past few years. The group of people fell silent again and only looked at Linhan. Since Xiaoqing knew that she was allergic to alcohol, why did she drink so hard today? Was she trying to drink herself to death? Seeing Luqing held in Dr. Wen's arms, they were suddenly not sure what she wanted to do tonight. If no one found her symptoms later, if she left alone now and something happened to her, no one would know. Most of the people here were medical workers. Alcohol allergy could be fatal if it was serious. Let go of me. Linhan, let go of me. When Luqing was held in the man's arms, and her breathing was a little irregular, she pushed him with red eyes. I don't want you anymore. Do you hear me? Even if I drink myself to death here, I won't want you anymore. Leave me alone. Don't mess around. Wait until you sober up. When Linhan looked at the woman in his arms whose cheeks were red because of breathing difficulties. Go to the hospital for desensitization injection and gastric lavage. You will have an accident. I don't want to go. I don't want to go. I'm a doctor myself. I know what I'm doing. Don't worry about me. When Luqing pushed him. Don't show up again. Don't show up again. I promise I won't pester you or beg you to look at me again. You can marry whoever you want. I'll pretend that I never had you as my brother. My life or death has nothing to do with you. When Linhan slowly frowned and warned in a low voice, don't make trouble again. When Luqing looked at him with red eyes, but didn't speak. She just stared at him. If her eyes could kill, she would cut him into pieces. In fact, many people didn't understand. When Linhan had always been very good to Luqing, his sister, but since the accident when she was 16 years old, since she began to put him in her heart, he began to keep a distance. For so many years, Luqing had changed from a princess in a honeypot to a bitter little lotus for him. No matter what she did, she couldn't move him. When Linhan's heart was probably made of cold iron, just like his name, So he threw Enriching's passionate heart to the ground again and again, trampled and crushed it mercilessly. I'm not making trouble. When Enriching seemed to see that he didn't believe her words at all, so she simply stopped struggling and calmed down in his arms. Looking into his cold eyes, she said, "Every word I said just now is true, Wen Linhan. There are so many warm people around me, but I nailed myself to you for so many years. When you chose to be engaged to another woman, I should have pulled myself out." This scene, the people in the private room silently stood up and slipped out, leaving the large private room to the two of them. Seeing that some readers mentioned that they wanted to see the story of this couple, I can insert a small part in the existing part of the story. In this way, it won't affect the direction of Nanheng Fengling's story, and it will only be interspersed according to the timeline of the story, and there won't be any mention of it. After all, the plot of T-City has already come to an end. Before and after the release of the update, there will be a lot of things that people want to see in the main plot. 4M. Chapter 1092. When Linhan pressed her shoulder and said solemnly, "Qing, you are in a bad mood, so you gave up a great opportunity in the United States and came to High City to be a guest professor. I don't blame you, but you were allergic to alcohol. Why did you come out to drink? Do you want to die, or what?" Wen Liqing didn't speak, but struggled hard in his arms. In just a short while, her neck was already red and there were some dense red bumps. This was the early symptom of allergy. It was itchy and painful, and it was difficult for her to breathe. But no pain could compare to this man who threw her heart to the ground and chose to marry another woman. When Linhan didn't let go, the others in the room had already left, so he didn't need to care about her face anymore. He looked down at her and said, "If I didn't see the letter you wrote in my email before you left the United States, if I didn't notice your extreme mood, if I didn't come over and let you continue to drink, I'm afraid that you will go into shock later. If you continue to drink, it will be too late to send you to the hospital immediately. Do you want to threaten me with your life and prevent me from getting engaged?" I didn't. Wen Liqing suddenly interrupted him and turned to look at him. "Even if I really die here, it has nothing to do with you. You said a few years ago that you have your own life and I have mine, and we shouldn't be so close to each other, right? Brother, isn't your purpose to make me leave you? You have no interest in that woman at all, but just because mom and dad like her, you, as a good son who has always respected them, even let them decide your marriage. You know that I will be angry when I see her, but you still agreed to the engagement. You forced me to give up. Okay, I give up now. Whether I am allergic or drunk to death, it won't bother you. I won't bother you anymore. My life has nothing to do with you. You have no responsibility. No one will blame it on you. You can continue to be a good son in the Wen family. Let me go." When Linhan's face instantly turned cold. "Qing, can you calm down?" Wen Liqing couldn't push him away at all, probably because she had drunk too much. Her skin was red and itchy all over, and her limbs were trembling faintly. She had no strength at all. Didn't he say that if she continued to pester him, he would cut off all ties with the Wen family and never appear in front of her again? Didn't he say that he had had enough of her misdeeds? No matter what she did, he wouldn't have any opinions, and she could do whatever she wanted? Before she left the United States, she had only been depressed in the middle of the night, so she sat in front of the computer and wrote a long, long letter. She wrote all the feelings she had for him since she was 16, everything, and then sent it to the email he hadn't used for many, many years. She thought that he couldn't see it. He hadn't used that mailbox for a long time. But he actually saw it. So what if he saw it? Everything she had shown over the years. Which one of them was not more direct than those stiff words? Now, she was finally going to give up completely and withdraw from his life. Even if the blood in her heart was almost dripping dry, she would not disturb him anymore. Wouldn't this be what he wanted and finally give him some peace and quiet? He could finally get rid of her. He was going to get engaged the next day, just as he wanted. Everything was going according to plan. Nothing was out of his control. Everything was going according to the rules. Nothing was out of his control. Everything was peaceful. This was the life he wanted. Seeing the more and more red bumps on Wen Liqing's neck and face, Wen Linhan didn't speak anymore, but suddenly picked her up and walked out. Wenlicheng had no ability to resist now. She just closed her eyes, frowned, and said, "Since I was a child, everyone has praised me as the most obedient child. In everyone's eyes, I was the so-called child of other families, but all my rebelliousness and willfulness were only exposed in front of you. How hypocritical I was. On the surface, I pretended to be a cold and aloof girl who didn't want to fall in love and marry for the time being. But in fact, I was a fool who secretly loved my brother for nearly 10 years. Even when I thought the blood relationship was irreversible, I would rather confess my love to you and insist on loving you. Even if you spurned me, hated me, and pushed me away, I just wanted you. Oh, who would have thought? I, Wenlicheng, am not what I look like on the surface. The real me is like this, the one you hate. I'm so unreasonable. Why did you come to High City?" As she spoke, Wenlicheng had been resisting leaning against him, but her head finally tilted to one side weakly. Wenlicheng protected her head with one hand, and she lay in his arms powerlessly. At the same time, her head leaned on his shoulder. Because of severe alcohol allergy, she felt suffocated and gasped uncomfortably. Her whole face turned red, and the red bumps on her neck became denser and denser. Wenlicheng walked out with her in his arms. Some of the people who had just slipped out of the private room went to the bathroom, some went to the card room next door, and some stood in the corridor chatting. When they saw Wenlicheng coming out with Wenlicheng in his arms, they all frowned worriedly. Is she really allergic? So serious? Without saying a word, Wenlicheng passed by them blankly and walked out with Wenlicheng in his arms. Seeing Dr. Winzen different back, these friends who had been with Wenlicheng all the year round had long been familiar with him. Not to mention Dr. Wen now. Even 10 years ago, when they were still young, this man who looked as gentle as jade was indifferent and didn't like to talk to people, so they had long been used to it. Wenlicheng didn't faint, but she was tipsy and suffocated, so she had no strength. After being carried out and being blown by the cold wind, she suddenly shivered all over. Wenlicheng subconsciously hugged the woman in his arms tightly and watched her shrink her head in his arms. It was very similar to the time when she was kidnapped when she was a child and refused to leave his arms for 3 days and 3 nights. It was also at that time that she was kidnapped and almost killed. At that time, he was still young and rescued her before the police arrived. From then on, she completely clung to him. Whether he was her brother or not, family love was not important. She only wanted him. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.